Mics are on. Okay. We'll call to order the May 1st meeting of the Issaquah Development Commission, and the first order of business will be the approval of minutes from our November 14th meeting, and we will then proceed to the public hearing for the Issaquah Plaza 221, after which we will have some administrative activities to take care of. David, at what point, why don't we go ahead and do the minute approval, if that's all right with the rest of the commission. And then before we start the public hearing, we'll have a little discussion about the change in procedure for how we're going to do it and make sure we're all on the same wavelength for that, okay? Are there any changes to be made by any of the commissioners to the minutes?
I had a couple. On page 2, there was just a couple of grammatical things under staff report. The first sentence, Lynn displayed a slide of the vicinity map explaining, and I think it was supposed to say explaining that the site is mostly undeveloped. So those two sentences need to be connected. And I'll actually hand my markups over to the secretary after.
Great, thanks.
About a third of the way down, the sentence, let's see, the sentence starting the community conference includes a proposed 9-lot single-family subdivision. Again, that sentence needs to be connected to the next one. There's a bit of a disconnect. It ends incorrectly. I think it's just supposed to continue on. On page 3, about halfway down the first paragraph, the steep slope buffer from the top, toe and sides of the slope, is 50 feet, and a process is in place to allow a slope buffer to be reduced to a minimum of 10 feet pursuant to, instead of pursuit to, a geotechnical report and assessment criteria being met, ensuring that, so there's a missing word there, that the reduction will not reduce the level of protection. A couple more edits near the end. Page 15 of 17, second paragraph from the bottom. That paragraph just needs to have, be appended in front with apartment building dash. Those comments refer to the apartment building, but it doesn't really note it. And the sentence in that paragraph, she would like the public works staff to strongly consider lining up driveways with existing streets and installing a stoplight. I think that might be it. Oh, under Polly, under comments and observations on page 15, the first paragraph, I don't know, it's a long time ago, not really sure how this worked out, but the sentences don't make sense together. One is the connection between the neighborhoods may be a good idea. She doesn't feel it's practical. I don't know if you can listen to the tape or not. The she doesn't feel it's practical, I don't think belongs in there. But if that's what I said on the tape, I guess that's what it is. They contradict each other through like the opposite. That was it.
Are there any other additions, corrections, deletions to the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes of the November 14, 2012 Development Commission meeting.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So the minutes are approved as amended. All right. We will now go to the public hearing. This is for the Issaquah Plaza 221, file number PLN 120065.
I guess the lights blink. Is your...
Yep. Public hearing for the Issaquah Plaza Development, files number PLN 120065, 66, and 67. These are site development permit, shoreline substantial development permit, and administrative adjustment of standards. I'll just read this briefly for the record. Application for approval of land use and shoreline permits to construct 2 commercial buildings. One building will have approximately 2,700 square feet with a drive-through. The second building will consist of approximately 11,000 square feet. 2 existing single-family homes will be demolished. An existing wetland will be preserved, and the stream and wetland buffers will be enhanced with native plantings. The project is located within the shoreline jurisdiction of Issaquah Creek. The project is located at the southwest corner of 56th Street Southeast and 221st Place Southeast. Now, as I said, this meeting will involve some changes in procedure from our previous policies that we followed here at the Development Commission. And these are primarily because we had the commission, or the community conference for this site on the 20th of April of 2011. And since then, there's been significant change. For example, the Central Issaquah Plan, which affects this site, was adopted by the City Council on December 17th last, and the Central Issaquah Development and Design Standards, which are part of the plan, didn't go into effect until April 29th, so they're very new. So those standards will be the criteria by which we pursue the review today. Part of that is, David, I'm going to ask you to amplify this, but the procedure basically tonight will involve a significant departure in that up to now we use what were called green sheets, which were a review of the specific criteria for the site, the specific city standards, and then there was an individual decision on the part of the commission as to whether or not the applicant had met the procedures, and we would approve with amendments or not approve. We're not, the city has decided, excuse me, not to use green sheets anymore. So we are now going to a different process, and I'll ask David to summarize, if he can, what he and I discussed on Monday, so that everybody hears and has an opportunity before we even start to make some clarifications. Now, I believe before we go any further, it's probable that after this meeting, we will have further discussion about how to improve on the process. But what we want to do is make sure that we're all on the same wavelength for this one, and we're doing it as we need to do it. So, David?
I'll step over you.
All right, sure.
Thanks. Thank you. Where to start? So, well, thank you to many of you who have been involved in the development of the Central Issaquah Plan and the development standards.
Is your mic on?
I get to say thanks twice, so for like 5 years, right? The Issaquah Development Plan was worked on, and here's the plan that sets the policy document. And then 17 days ago, the City Council adopted the new zoning code, the new standards. And while this project came in the door about 2 years ago, these are the new standards that apply for this project tonight. So when you talk about green sheets and how to do this, this is a land use code similar to what we've always worked with. In the past, we had 8 pages of green sheets. We call them the design criteria checklist. And if you had to really generalize, I'd say chapters 11 through 17 become essentially the new green sheets in here. And so you could say we still have green sheets. They're multicolored because we print on colored paper now, but they're much longer. So to go through every one like we used to, I think would take a long time. And I propose maybe we focus on the general concepts and the issues that come up, and I can help guide that discussion. And when we get to a certain point, I suggest I've got recommended conditions of approval to address different issues, and we can plunge into that. I was hoping to show up on the screen the actual code so we could read it together, but the internet doesn't seem to be working too well, so I'll blame the internet on that. But each of you have a document here tonight. We have a couple more extras if the audience would like to read along at home or look on the internet at home. So I guess that's the proposal. I can do a brief presentation, rather brief, get the project going if the applicant wants to give some comments. And then when we get into the green sheet element, that can be the discussion where we go through the different issues and really focus on what we want to talk about. How does that sound?
David, so let me make sure that I'm on the same wavelength for what we talked about earlier. I believe that the process that you and I agreed on is that we will, at the conclusion of each of the chapters that we're going to discuss, we will stop at that point and say, basically, are there questions, comments, whatever, in addition to what went on for that? And then we will, at the end of each one of these chapters, 11 through 17, I believe, is each one of these, we will say, do we individually believe that this is meets the standards as defined, meets the standards as amended by us, or does not meet? And then we'll go to the next chapter. So there are 6 chapters that we'll do that with.
So would we be proposing conditions at that time in our discussion, or still at the end?
I think we would do it at that time.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of what we talked about. If we have conditions, we'll talk about it then, and then at the end, we'll still have the vote on whether or not to approve it with the conditions that we cited.
I wonder, though, technically you'd have to, at the end, make the motion to
Yes,
approve.
no, we do.
And then make the motion to add the conditions.
Yeah, okay.
So it's more of a discussion of
Of the
potential conditions, because you're not going to propose them
Yes.
at that time.
Right.
Or approve them at that
Correct.
time. Okay.
Unless at the very beginning, we started with a motion to approve and then
Yeah.
worked on it.
I think in the past with the green sheets, that was essentially the process where we did talk through them and then we added conditions at the end. And I think that's probably helpful to do it at the end, then we get the whole context of the discussion, or content of the discussion before, because there may be some, rethinking of a condition, once we've had the whole conversation. So I kind of like the idea of motion at the end, add conditions.
Yep. All right.
Okay, and in the staff report is formatted to go chapter by chapter. So when we get to chapter 11, we can use that as a guide and go chapter 11, 12, 13, 14, so and so. And then the conditions are formatted to kind of follow in that chronological order as well. All right, so shall we start again? Okay, so the brief summary of the project is that this is a 2-building commercial proposal at the corner of 56th Street and 221st Place Southeast, in the kind of northeast area of Issaquah. I'm going to go from the website here, staff report, instead of a PowerPoint, because that isn't seeming to show up. So here's a site plan showing that, and the frontage shown here is 221st, and it wraps around the corner to 56th Street. And then to the east across the street is the gas station and Brown Bear Car Wash. And then to the north across 56th Street, immediately north, is a stormwater detention pond, and then the King County Courthouse, FedEx Distribution Center. North across 56th Street, where my mouse is trying to show there. Does that kind of orient you? So north is to the left here, not up, not up. At the corner of the property is proposed a 2,700 square foot restaurant. It's been identified as Taco Time. So right here with a drive-through that wraps around behind the building with one driveway located between the buildings and a second one at the very south end of the property. In between those 2 driveways is an 11,000 square foot 1-story building. And we've talked about possible tenants, but at this time it remains a commercial retail tenant, building. And so you've got the parking in between, parking in the rear, and this site has the North Fork of Issaquah Creek and Issaquah Creek that come together towards the back part of the property back here. So almost all of this area you see beyond the parking lot is one of those 2 stream buffers, as well as a wetland you see in the hatch mark here with a buffer extending out towards the parking lot. So you've got 3 environmental constraints towards the back. So like we've already talked about, this project is the first one in the door to, be reviewed under the central plan standards. I think I'd like to thank or say the applicant's we've been working for the last about 2 years. And I think it was April 2 years ago, not 1 but 2, that we were in front of you with a community conference. And so at that time we anticipated the central plan. It was in process. We talked about the basic elements of the plan of pedestrian friendly, urban versus suburban orientation. So pushing the building out to the street, the parking in the rear, the drive-through at the rear. And I recall some iterations I've seen is what, for example, the drive-through was front and center out at the corner, and we've worked and worked with the applicant to turn that around and try to meet, these basic elements that this central plan vision is talking about. So, what else to say? We have anticipated that in the old code, again, we had the setback, which was 10 to 20 feet back from the street. This project proposes to meet the new central plan standards that ask for a 0 to 10 foot setback from 221st Place. And the plans here show a setback of about 4 to 5 feet off of the sidewalk. And I know you can't see that on the screen here. More detailed in the plan sets that you should have received. As far as impervious surface and floor area ratio, things like that, building height, this project is well below those limits in the new zoning standards, well below. Parking is another element that in the new standards have established a minimum and maximum standard. This project, as I recall in the staff report, says it's something like 3 or 4 stalls just above the maximum. And in this corner right here, the southeast corner of the parking lot, you'll see the little shaded line here is part of the creek buffer, extends onto those 4 stalls. And because the project is just over the max by about that many, a condition is proposed to eliminate those 4 stalls and at the same time better comply with the creek buffer regulations here. Let's see. I'm going to step to the conditions of approval and use it as a guide to look at some key issues here. And then we can talk about those later. I've talked about pushing the building out towards the street. Landscaping, we know has always been an important element. It remains an important element. And so this project, I think, is doing a good job of meeting the intent of the landscape code and the design standards. There's some elements to look at. So at the River and Streams Board, that group talked about specific plant types being potentially invasive plants to the buffer in the rear, the Japanese holly and Japanese barberry shrubs that give an evergreen screen to the parking lot. So a condition 8D is proposed to swap those out for more less invasive plants, but still has that evergreen feel that meets the intent that we're looking at. Other parts of the landscaping that I think are emphasized in the conditions is to put a green element, especially, well, in front of both buildings, between the sidewalk of 221st and the buildings. So today, this plan shows, a nice landscape strip between the sidewalk and the street, but I believe it shows kind of the wide sidewalk going up to the base of the building. And so that was a late addition to the central plan standards 2 weeks ago on Monday, was to say that even if there's a 0 setback, we still want some amount of greenery between the base of the building and the sidewalk to have that strip of green there. So there's a condition talked about it. It doesn't mean to say a continuous strip the whole way, but to work with that sidewalk frontage here you know, and have some places for outdoor seating and benches on the sidewalk, but also some raised planters and other landscape elements along the southern building frontage, as well as, you know, if you've got some little bump outs, bump backs in the Taco Time building here. Related to landscaping, then moving to community space, the code talks about the requirement for community spaces, public places around the buildings. This project, the southern building, shows in a minimum of 20 by 20 feet is the absolute number we talk about. This southeastern plaza here, I think, does fulfill that dimensional requirement. And at the northern building, it's just slightly, I think it's like 30 feet long and maybe 15 feet wide. So it doesn't meet those exact requirements. So there's a condition suggesting to expand the width of it. And at the same time, that pushes it out towards 56. Then you can start getting that public sidewalk and interaction with a plaza at the same time, and by enlarging it. But we still want a nice landscape screen element there too. So that's kind of a condition proposed that when we get to the building permit stage, we go into more further detail with the intent that we're setting up in these conditions and really dive into that detail of design like that. Now I'm starting to talk about the conditions that I said we wouldn't talk so much about. So maybe I'll wrap this up pretty quick here. So this is a public hearing tonight, and you have received public comments that I've passed out, several emails received in the last couple hours on bike lane issues, and it's a good issue to be aware of. The comment is that the cross-section on 221st talks about, I think, an 8-foot sidewalk, a 6-foot planter strip. The code, generic code, asks for a 5-foot, parallel parking, and then a 5-foot bike lane, and 10-foot driving lanes. And there's a cross-section in your staff report. In this project review, as well as in review of potential road developments of 221st all the way down to 62nd, where you take the turn off to Krispy Kreme, we've been looking at that whole road section on another project and really weighed the pros and cons of whether a bike lane makes sense to happen on this street or not. And where the staff landed was that due to the King County Regional Trail located like a block to the east that parallels East Lake Sammamish Parkway, and the narrow street that 221st is extending all the way down to 62nd, with buildings that are pretty close to the road, it looked really tough to get all these elements, including the bike lanes, into that section of 221st from 56 south all the way to 62nd. So the call we made was we've got this parallel trail nearby, and over time, let's try and get some connections from 221st through to the regional trail, also as developments occur. And due to these constraints, we made the call to not include the bike lanes on this street. So, and you'll hear and you've seen in the comments some good reasons why there should be a bike lane in there, and there's good reasons for both sides. So we can have a good discussion, and you'll hear perhaps comments on that shortly in the public hearing part. And I think I'll leave it at that, and we can talk more in detail later on that. So I think I've said enough. I'm here to answer questions later on. I know the applicant's here. There's some folks from the public, so I'll step aside now.
All right. If there are members of the public that want to speak later on, we'll hear next from the applicant. But if there's anybody from the public that wants to speak, I'd appreciate it if, do we have a sign-in sheet? I don't see one on the table there. If you could sign in, and then we'll give you an opportunity to speak later. Now, does the applicant, at this point, does the applicant care to make a presentation to us, or just be available for clarification, answering questions? Say again? Be available for any presentation. Okay. In that case, does anybody, are there any members of the public that wish to address the commission? If so, this is your opportunity to do so. Yeah, you can just come up, but when you come up, please identify yourself by your name. You know the drill. I know you know the drill, so that'll be fine.
Oh, it's sort of skimpy. Hi, my name's Connie Marsh, and I have a store at 1175 Northwest Gilman Boulevard, Suite B11, and also live in town, and I sent you some comments, which I'm assuming you read and were very excited about. So part of my dismay is I suffered the last 5 years of the Central Issaquah plan and sucked into the vision of a biking, walking, linked, connected community. And then the very first thing that comes in says, oh, no bike lane. And then I just went and looked at the road segments for 221st. And parts of 221st aren't even showing sidewalks on both sides of the road. They're showing that if you're on one side, you would have to cross over and move back, which, I'm sorry, this whole road segment is totally against what I think our vision just was. We worked for years for that. And so now, if you say in this, okay, we'll remove a bike lane, it is step one in that slide to non-connection. And in the, I don't know what you all got in your packets, but in what I was able to see on the website, there was nothing in the presentation that was showing all the linkages that were carefully outlined in the Central Issaquah plan. How are the pedestrians going to be using the entire area? How are the bikes getting through? And so I don't understand how this is beginning this connected community that we are trying to create, because for me, the information was not available. And that's an imperative. If we're going to do it, we need to do it right. Where is the connection to the trail from this parcel? How do you get across the street? Which way are bikes going to go? They seem to be talking about moving the North Fork, and this has a lot of the buffer stuff about the North Fork in it, so I don't know whether that is going to be impacted in the future when they move the North Fork. It's not clear, so the context of all of this is just not in place. There's another thing that occurred to me as I was looking at it, is we have access required from the state because it's a shoreline of statewide significance. And so that's why you're looking at a trail and viewpoints going out, supposedly looking over the creek. Though it's not clear you'll actually ever be able to see the creek from these viewpoints. It would be nice to have language added to require that. But you'll notice that the trail segment doesn't connect to anything. It is just a trail segment. And when you look at the Central Issaquah plan, this is not a place that the Central Issaquah plan has said a trail will be. So I don't understand why we would create a trail segment unlinked to anything, or if we want to have a trail, is this decision then going to imply a future trail that's going to be drawn on a map somewhere? Because I think every decision that DC makes will forevermore have implications because we're supposed to be creating all these linkages together. So you saw my comments about the presentation, how I thought it was confusing. I don't know if there's a picture to be drawn that would make it easy to make a whole town, not just a bunch of little parcels that you develop one at a time. Because I think it's time to have to do that and to change the presentation so we make good decisions. And so this is sort of what I think about this parcel, and then I'm raising it to 30 feet to make a great city. And I'm sorry if you feel like that's inappropriate, but I think we need it for the entire city for the future. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. I think hopefully you saw my letter. I guess the East Lake Sammamish Trail, if you've walked it before it's been shut down for a year or whatever it's been, it's all lined by cyclone fences. So there's not connection between 56th and 61st, 62nd, whatever that street, kind of short little stub there that goes across to Home Depot, Fred Meyer, Krispy Kreme, and all that. So I don't see it as really that. It's a great commuter access. It's going to be used. People will walk it. But in terms of people getting around to these shopping areas, or if we get any residential like we're supposed to in the Central Issaquah plan, especially at night and all, they're not going to be using that trail to walk. They are going to be using the local sidewalks where they feel safer. To me, if you go with an 8-foot wide sidewalk in this area and you don't have a bike facilities or just have a 10-foot lane, a lot of the bikers are going to end up on that 8-foot sidewalk. I mean, what's the Pickering Trail is 8 feet, right? I mean, some of our standards for the multi-use trail are in the 8-foot range. So I think you're going to see that sidewalk be a jumble of a lot of the bikes are going to retreat to there. I mean, some of the bikes will be over at like Sammamish, some will be in the street. That street's going to get busier. It's going to connect to a $1 million bridge over to from this street over to Costco. I think people are going to be using that, and I think I'd go to a narrower sidewalk and narrow that 6-foot planting and see if you can get the room for a bike lane before I do some things, because and then really actually that would make to me the sidewalk safer if it's at 5 feet or 6 feet than 8 feet, because 8 feet says it's multi-use. I guess that's my main pitch. Good, thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Krieger. 2 properties in Issaquah. I also work in Issaquah at Costco. I'm a bike commuter. I moved here to this town in specific because I wanted to be able to get to Costco without taking a car. It hasn't been easy because Issaquah keeps on closing my bike trails and making demands like a bicycle needs to be on a 5-foot wide swath in order to ride anywhere. I don't know if any of you have ever gone around Lake Sammamish on a bike, but it's not 5 feet all the way around. The city of Redmond knows that a cyclist can pass. They can do a lot of things. We don't need 5 feet. I would like to recommend a variance to go to just 3 feet and don't lose any bike trails anywhere. It's, you know, not stylish right now. All the communities around us get it, but we seem to want to take a hit at our bicycles, you know, our existing bike trails too much. And the connectivity is poor, and making it poor isn't a good choice. I would personally really appreciate it because this is right where I ride all the time. And it's tough. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your input. All right. At this point, let's start the process, David.
Okay. I think we're going to have to go by heading. Should we start with the chapters?
Yeah.
You have to go with the headings because I see there are no page numbers in the staff report. So, Chapter 11. Is Section O, top of the page, Central Issaquah Plan Design Standards, and site design. So this chapter was intended to be the first of the design chapters. Yes. Yeah.
That's the question already.
Uh-huh.
There was stuff in the development standards that I had questions about, though.
Okay.
So they're way back before all of the design standards. Did anybody else have questions on the development standards as opposed to design standards?
Like the bike lane?
Yeah, I think bike lane was one. I had another comment under the street section,
Okay.
discussion under the community space. So I had a bunch of comments that occur before we get to design standards.
Well, yeah, why don't we do that first, if that's all right with you, Dave?
Fine.
If the commissioners have already identified specific issues that they want to get clarified or whatever, why don't we bring those up now and then do what we talked about later, which is to go by chapter. And
Oh, I'm fine to go by chapter. I just.
no, I'm saying we'll
there
go
were-
by chapter, but let's
Okay.
do what you suggest first. Let's-
Okay, because these are all chapters too. The
Yeah.
development standards is 1 through whatever, 10?
Start in earlier
Yeah.
chapters.
Sure. So do you
You
want
guys
to,
agree? You had
do
stuff?
you want to do that?
Okay.
Sure. Okay, Mary Lou, do you want to bring up this?
Actually, if you just want to start going through those, people may have questions on earlier chapters than I did, so I don't know how you want, if you just want to ask if anybody, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, I didn't have any, or up to 4, I didn't have any questions, but if somebody else might have. Mine started at 6. Did anybody have any earlier ones?
Yeah, actually, well, mine starts at 6 too, so
Oh,
it
well-
might even be the same thing.
Go ahead.
David, in the paragraph, excuse me, that on chapter 6 that starts with 221st Street, and I think this is maybe what we're talking about here. The street section is attached. The applicant will be required to provide half-street improvements of this section along the 221st frontage. The improvements consist of an 8-foot sidewalk, a 6-foot planter strip, 8-foot parallel parking, and 10-foot travel lane. And I may be behind the curve on this thing, but I don't, what is a travel lane?
Where the cars drive, the driving
That's
lane.
that's the main car?
Yeah.
That's what it's called now, a travel lane? Has it always been called that? Okay,
Yeah.
anyways, I didn't know what that was. So this is where we're talking about the bike lane, right? This is the bike lane
Yes,
issue?
yes,
All right.
yes, it is.
Okay, so due to the nearby King County Regional Trail to the east, in close proximity of buildings on either side, on the other side, improvements further south on 221st, the bike lane should not be included in this road section. So that's the key focus of what the public comment has been on here today. The one suggestion was to reduce the size of the planter strip. Can you tell us why the city wants the planter strip to be the width that it is?
Yeah, I guess the reason for the planter strip width would be to establish that greenery element. You know, it's competing priorities in the whole plan. So one of them was to maintain or create green elements throughout developments. You know, this is a tiny part of the green necklace idea that has all been talked about. So, you know, again, it's balancing priorities, and it's 6 feet wide enough, you know, you can start reducing it, and that's one option. Is, you know, go to 5 feet, go to 4 feet, less than 4 feet, and things don't grow so well. So you just pick and think. That's that reason.
And another point of clarification, the standards for the width of bike lanes are county standards, or do they vary by city?
I think they vary by city, and I wouldn't pretend to be the complete expert on bike lane widths. I've seen some, I think, on very, you know, slow traveled streets be 4 feet wide. The busier streets, you want to make them a little wider for, you know, give a more buffer. So there might be some flexibility
But you
there.
think they're city
5
by
feet.
cities?
5 feet is this city standard.
Okay.
Yeah, I think every bike lane we've got going on is 5 feet.
Okay.
Can I
That's-
follow up on your question? So the section on, no page numbers.
On the next page,
Yes, on the next page. The section on the next page is for a road that has a right-of-way between 66 and 76 feet. So obviously it's meant to cover
Thank you.
varying degrees of road width. However, all of the elements on there, sidewalk, landscaping strip, parking, bike lane, and travel lane, in my mind, they're all necessary. I was never thinking when I was looking at those that we might actually cut out a bike lane. And what I'm nervous about is, I agree a lot with what we heard from the public comment, but my question was going to be, no bike lane yet on that street, right? That there would be a bike lane. And now I'm kind of listening to what Connie said, thinking if we don't do this, we're never going to get a bike lane on that road. And that's what this decision means. No bike lane now means no bike lane ever. Is that where this would sort of take us?
It would make it tough to put it later. Yeah,
Right.
I think so.
And the other observation I had was that in looking at the parking layout and the way the buildings are oriented on the site, there looks like there's buckets of parking. Why didn't we consider giving up the parking lane instead of the bike lane? Because, to be honest, looking at it right now, to me, this doesn't look a lot different than a lot of the other developments we have in town. It's not particularly that much denser, and it still has a lot of surface parking.
Right.
So why not give up the parking versus the bike lane?
So I think if you look at just this property,
Yeah.
it's possible to get a bike lane in here. It's very possible. In fact, we had it. I think it was in, then it was out, and it was in and out. But it's looking further south down the street where it gets tighter, and the North Fork of Issaquah Creek at the very south end is very close to the road. It's, I think, like within 5 feet of the road. So this is tied into a larger project review than just this site. And so we looked down at that end of town, of that road. You know, we're starting to debate whether there's even room for planter strips or even sidewalks on parts of this street. So this is part of a bigger issue.
Yeah, I guess the concern is if you look in the central Issaquah area at a lot of streets, there's a lot of strange things going on now. So if that's, it seems to me like if we're going to use that rationale, we're not going to end up getting all of the elements that we wanted. I kind of am leaning towards, I'm not sure how it should be striped or painted, whether, I don't think you draw a little tiny bike lane at one end of the street because the bikers are going down the center of the street. But keeping that width and keeping your options open makes sense to me. But I'll let somebody else ask questions. I'm sure they have
Can I add a
questions
little
on
more
the bike one too.
background to this that might help? Is that we looked at the various comprehensive plan maps that talk about bike lanes and noticed that the current comprehensive plan that has a non-motorized plan of the city does not show a bike lane on this street. The task force of the central plan that spent a lot of time on this did show a bike lane on this street. This most recent plan I was waving does not show a bike lane on this specific street. And then the fourth thing is we have a pedestrian bike plan that is being reviewed for the whole city. It started at the beginning of this year. We hope it'll be done by the end of this year, looking at bike and ped facilities throughout the city. So unfortunately, this project is just slightly ahead of that. It'd be wonderful to say the plan says this, but again, it's premature. So I want to make another point. This cross-section is designed for this core street from the plan. It's just, but then we recognize to put in bike lanes or not, that's what this 66 to 76 feet, it's 5 feet, bike lane or not. And then you go to this more, to the non-motorized plan and the central plan that says, okay, does this street have bike lanes or not? Today it doesn't. And so together with that map and then our review of that street up and down, that's where we arrived at. So, but you're talking about keeping your options open. Go ahead.
Yeah, David, I've got another, I know that I'm familiar with this street, and you referred to the proximity at the north end to the creek, and that it gets very, very tight up there.
Yeah.
How critical, from what you know is in the pipeline for that part of 221st, how critical is this parallel street parking up there? What I'm getting at is if there's a bike lane put in, could it be that up at that end there's just not enough room and the bike lane continues and but the parallel parking is on the lot, or are the lots the projected work so tight that there's not going to be enough room for parking up if it doesn't occur also on the street.
I think at the very south end, we're not looking at parallel parking down at that, towards that end, maybe on the east side of the street, but really stripping out a lot of the elements out of this cross-section
Yeah.
when you get to the south end.
So would there be a travel lane and a bike lane, but no parallel parking? Or
That's a possibility, yeah.
So what I'm getting at is you could have the parallel parking in the bike lane here, but as you get toward the area that's more constrained, you could say no street, no parallel parking, and have the bike lane continue.
You might be able to have that configuration, right?
Right. Mike?
Just a couple, just to get clear here, because the plan does call for, and I'm catching up here as we go since we just got this tonight. So,
Okay.
but it does identify this as a core street. The language in the code, page not numbered, looks like 9 of 14 of chapter 6, talks about the bike lane as provided as necessary for safety of cyclists due to higher volumes of traffic and slightly higher speed. So it's anticipated these roads are to carry additional auto capacity, meaning they're going to be relatively busy streets, and so that safety is contemplated. The map at the back of that chapter actually shows this as a core street. The challenge I think that we're faced with, because and you just mentioned that the PED bike plan is being updated for the city and trying to figure out what sorts of connections the city wants to see for non-motorized vehicles, et cetera. And so it's like it's kind of a chicken and egg conversation we're in here, but we don't want to prevent the option of creating a bike lane or a shared lane on this segment of the road, because it essentially sets the precedent for the rest.
Yeah.
The other part of the challenge is I don't know how far we can go as a commission in controlling this. This is a CIP decision for the city, and so I'm a little concerned. But here's another thought where we maintain that flexibility, and you could go with a wider shared lane instead of constrained to the 10-foot travel lane that's described. You go to a wider lane, take it out to 13 feet or so, where it's easier for bikes and cars to share safely that space as they travel through the corridor. It may not be a designated bike lane, but it's a shared lane that has capacity for avoidance.
Mike, where would you take that out of, though?
You'd take it out of the sidewalk.
Okay.
You would reduce the sidewalk width to accomplish that. So, and I know that conflicts with the other half of the standard. So it's kind of a give and take here. The other option is you've got to push into the property to create the space.
Well, I guess I wanted to offer, it doesn't have to be just one or the other. We could look at taking a foot from the landscaping, a foot from the sidewalk, maybe a foot from the development or two. You start adding them up, and we'd balance the priorities and find 5 feet.
Yeah, and David, the thing that seems to be kind of logical to me is the city and the state, and there's been a lot of money put in the underpass under 90. And so if there's no bike, you can come down there, ride that if you want to get to this property from the other side of 90, and you're coming from the Gilman Village side, and all of a sudden you get down to that one area and there's no bike path, or it gets real tight. So if we can figure out a way, if it can be figured out a way by narrowing the other thing to allow bikers to get back and forth on that road, I think that would be desirable, because like I said, the city went to a great deal of trouble to put that underpass in there.
So here's a proposal, maybe to help this along. I'm sensing there's great desire, and I understand it. There's good reasons here. Maybe some condition could be written, something like, prior to issuance of the building permit or other construction permits, the administration shall revisit the need for bike lanes, and if required, plans shall be revised as needed to reflect this requirement.
Close, but not quite there.
Okay,
I don't like
start.
the if required, because I think what you're hearing is we think it's required. I don't know if I'm comfortable passing that back and having it taken out again.
So that's something to think about. If you want to massage that might move this discussion along.
Okay.
I guess I just want to chime in too. I think that I think Connie made a great point. This is really the first project after a 5-year process of creating the Central Issaquah Plan for a live, work, play. And this is really the only north-south route we have right now that's not a regional transit type route, you know, East Lake Sammamish or 56 that, so it's the one area, and to say, well, we'll just shunt it off onto the regional trail and do it that way, it seems to me we've gone right up against what we've intended. And I agree with Mary Lou. I don't think in this area that the street parking, if anything, I think the parallel parking can create more of a danger for traffic, you know, people backing up, coming out, and those kind of things. Opening doors. I'd rather see the street parking come out because I think there's plenty of parking on the site. There's no other uses on the west side of the street that will try to park in their parking lot or use that up. I'd rather get rid of the street parking and make it into a bike lane, even if we lose it later on down the, you know, further south. At least we've started with it, focused on the bike lane, and not take any footage from the project itself.
Right. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So the next chapter, all right, that was 7, right? Or,
Six.
no, 6. 6, right, 6. So, David, are we going to go to, is there any more discussion, question about that? Are we going to come back at the end and make a?
Yep. One small question on, just above the right-of-way picture for 56th Street. There was a paragraph in there about Gilman Boulevard, and I wondered if that's why that was in there. I'm thinking it's just something that came out of the code, but it really doesn't have anything.
Has nothing to do with this.
No.
This was copied, I just copied a
Yep.
page right out of the code and put it in there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
You want to go to 7?
Yep.
Sure.
Okay. Are
And
there
7,
questions, comments in 7? Mary Lou?
I had a question, actually it's probably more for the applicant, and it was on the second page of Chapter 7 where it talks about the required community spaces. I wonder if the applicant could discuss how the one full-size community space and the slightly smaller one that doesn't quite qualify, how they provide all-season and all-season protection, because I didn't really pick that off the plans very well. I'm wondering, how do you use these areas year-round?
So I'm going to go to a site plan down here, so anyone want to talk about that? Whoa, this thing just,
We have that site plan.
yeah. It just went tiny on me here. Look at that. Is that better? Whoa. All right. I saw it. There it was. How's that?
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah? Okay.
Let's see, my name is Howard Kimura. I'm the architect with HG Kimura Architect, PLLC. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for, especially Dave and the City of Issaquah, for allowing us to plan this project. I haven't been nearly as involved in the last 2 years, but with Derek and Chris, I know they've been talking about this job, and to allow them to plan for the Central Issaquah plan in the future, that's quite a feat for them to do that, you know, up front. So we'd just like to say thank you for that. In terms of the question, let's see, the question was the public spaces, how is that going to be used year-round?
No, yeah, well, there's something about in the code that suggests that these need to be for all seasons. And I'm wondering if these are outdoor spaces that have canopies or. areas where you can be protected from the rain.
Yeah, that's a difficult one to do in the Northwest. I know we wrestle with that a lot,
Yep.
you know. And most of them that we do, we try to, you know, get at least south-facing exposures so that in the wintertime, you know, it's either too cold or too hot in this region. And so even when it's sunny, we get people that are just too hot, even with canopies, and, you know, the tables are dirty. But I know we tried to locate that plaza, at least on the taco time, right up here. See, on the south face right there. At least we'd have kind of a warmer environment there. We do have some building overhangs, but they're mainly for the building entry overhangs and protection, weather protection. But in terms of the plaza itself, we just have some tables out there to be used, and that is a difficult plaza to be used as well because it's right against 56, and so we wrestled with placing some trusses out here, you know, some kind of structure to provide some of the customers with, you know, some level of comfort that they've got landscape buffers, some kind of structure between the busy traffic on 56, and try to convince people to sit out there. And if we don't have that protection, it's difficult to get them out there. So I know I've seen a lot of plazas that are built and with the intention of being used, but if you don't have that protection and adequate balance, it just is not used. But for this one, I don't think we have the actual year-round requirement satisfied in that plaza on the south, or on the north face.
I think that, yeah, that one's on the north.
North.
What about the one on the south, the larger one?
Yeah, this one back up here.
Can you make that show up, David?
Let's see, I don't know if that can move.
Here, show up.
Yeah, I gotta move that just over.
Right there.
Yeah. Now that one is a little bit bigger, and I suppose, I don't know, Kevin, if the landscape architect was talking about putting any covers out there, or, you know, we got kind of the north is on this direction, south, so we got the kind of the southwesterly exposure, which is usually the very warm side in the afternoon. But in terms of winter weather, I don't think we have any protection on that plaza.
Can I add a little? The plans show a 4-foot canopy on some of those elevations, 4 feet wide, and our code talks about at least a minimum of 6 feet, so there's a condition in here making that wider.
But those are canopies on the building, right?
Right.
But in order to make those spaces usable, what were we not expecting more in what we would classify as a community space so that there is a covered area of some sort?
I think
Okay.
there's something to ask for a little more covered space.
Not that the whole space is covered, but is the intent to get something covered if it's community?
No, I think
Partly
I think
covered?
that's a good question too, and I don't know if anybody would really have the answer from David, if you know, but, because I would wonder all season could mean that if it is hardscape, so that if it's wet, it doesn't turn muddy, it's not just grass. If it's got lighting on it, so that if it's in, 4 o'clock in February and it's dark
can
out,
see.
that you still have lighting available and so forth. I
I
don't
think there's a
know that
lot of things we could explore on that, and, we're open to a lot of it. I know the discussions we've had in the past with Dave is, here's the requirement, let's take a look at these. We've been focusing a lot on this roadway here and the frontage and how much property take, what kind of overhangs. And so probably our attention hasn't been nearly focused on that corner. But I think having something that could respond to that would be a good idea. If that's part of the plan, that's part of the intentions, maybe between Dave and us, we can talk about some ideas on how to accommodate that. But like I said before, it's in this climate, in the Northwest, it's just a wet area. And it's, I know people talk about it being either too hot or too cold, so they don't use the plazas. But we've built a lot of plazas out there for people to use, and some get used, but not all the time.
It was mentioned earlier that at this point, the tenants for that building have not been identified?
That's correct. This building, I don't think the tenants have been identified.
If a tenant in that building was a restaurant or something like that wanted to expand that, David, they'd be allowed to come to the city and say, if it goes in like that, and then they get a tenant that says, hey, we'd like to have an outside terrace here.
Oh, yeah.
They have the ability to go and expand that, right? Or not expand it, but to modify it to provide more shelter.
Sure.
And I think there wasn't the goal to have at least one restaurant or two in that building, or one?
As you can imagine,
a very sought after.
I'm sorry, we're going to have you, if you're going to speak, you have to identify yourself.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, Derek Doak, one of the applicants, live in Sammamish. No, the intent of that property has gone, I've been with the property 5 years now when we bought it. And the intent has gone from everything from an office product, a medical product, a retail product. It's a very sought after corner, as everyone knows. That's why it gets a lot of attention. We're still getting calls today from doctor groups who'd like to have it. Costco's expansion, as you all know about, so there's been opportunities, people looking at, can we do a 3-story office building there? I mean, it's just been a lot of interest on the corner. Our focus as the ownership group has been retail, potential restaurant. We get a lot of letters of intent from the traditional retail type settings, which does include some restaurant. But originally, 5 years ago, that was going to actually be a bakery. There was a bakery that wanted to come into town and go in there with sandwiches and have an outdoor seating area and so forth. So it could be, at this point, we don't know what the tenant use would be at that, but expansion would be capable on the building itself.
Mr. Chairman. Point of clarification, that's a good point. You know, you don't have the tenant identified right now. And what happens if it's used for a warehouse? Do we still need that community space?
Well, I think from the warehouse, it wouldn't be allowable. It's not an allowable use for that marketplace. Because now with the regulations, the way they are, there's only certain uses that can be in there. It was a tire store, a large national chain tire store that wanted to come in there. And that was one of the uses that wouldn't be available at this junction. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that we'd have to do with it in order to fit that. But right now, it's primarily retail, which allow there, and also I believe that multifamily is now also available to be used here.
Just,
Okay, thank you.
just a quick kind of comment here. So on comment and a question, I guess. So part of it is, the idea is you want to create community spaces that are inviting and they're attractive to whatever activity is going on nearby. And you want to have both fixed features and then those that are flexible, I think, when it's creating the weather protection or the interest, I think. So I think it's important that we pay attention to what are the fixed features that we think are appropriate and make sure that they're appropriately addressed in the conditions, and those that might be flexible, like movable tables with chairs and tables with umbrellas that you see, like if there's outside of coffee shop or heaters. And because we don't want to get overly rigid when we do this, but we also want to make sure we're paying attention to, let's make sure that we're doing appropriate screening from the street and it's being located in the right place to attract, if it's south-facing for warmth in the colder days, et cetera. And the challenge down by the taco time at that corner, and you did some things to try to create visible screening from the street, but that's going to be that's a tough space because you've got the drive-through and everything all happening right around that. But in this particular instance, maybe there are some things we could do to add some additional features as a condition. But I think that flexibility is an important piece too in how these spaces get used. So.
Ray?
Yeah, comment. That's a very good point, and I would echo that. But I think, to be fair to the applicant, it's like, give us something that we think we want. We don't know what it is right now. I think we need to be fair to the guy, what is being flexible? They propose something that, what? And I appreciate the point that you made, and I would agree with that it'd be nice if we have some flexibility. But at the same time, I guess we need to realize the applicants can't just keep coming up with ideas, and it's time, and it takes your time, costs money, and I just caution that we try to be cognizant of that point.
So tell us, thanks, Ray. Tell us what does this plan include right now for that spot on the site? Can you go over that for us again?
Yeah, I think that spot was just, well, you want to say something, Derek?
Well, are you referring to the southern building?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right now, is this an 11,281 square foot retail?
No, I'm talking about the public space.
Oh, for the public space? It was just open public space. Then you've got an awning that comes out from a door area, and then a sidewalk for the other parking and a handicap location. So there isn't anything else. It wasn't planned for anything other than meeting the open area space, and then whoever the tenant comes in can then come in for permit for outdoor seating or whatever needs to be
Okay.
covered.
Okay.
David, did you condition in here that more had to be done? Because
I did.
You probably did. It's just, the report's a little long, so it's kind of hard to remember
Thanks for
what's in it
that
and stuff.
tip. Yeah.
So, so you did say that more has to be done in that area in order to meet Chapter 7?
Yeah, and it's condition 4.
Okay, good.
And is there more?
Yep.
And it references a specific section, 7.3.B, point 1, point F.
So that's meaning the developer looks at that list of adding benches or paving stones or whatever. Otherwise, they look like they meet the landscape requirement part of it, just not anything beyond that right now.
Right.
Okay.
I have a question though on that, on the north side of the restaurant building. It sounded like it was just a couple feet short of meeting the 20-foot width requirement. Was there any specific, given that you, I'm assuming, knew about the 20 feet, was there a specific reason?
Yeah, I think we were wrestling around with, well, Dave is aware of that, but there's several vaults in the area that we're trying to figure out what to do. They're above-ground utility vaults of some sort, traffic vaults, and they've been kind of an eyesore there, so we've been trying, I think Dave has conditioned the project for us to work out how we're going to potentially relocate those so that they're not an eyesore. Yeah, right in that corner there. But you kind of see we've hidden the vaults with some landscaping in there, and but they stick up like an eyesore about 4 or 5 feet high, and so that's been an obstacle. But otherwise, we would have moved that plaza way out. And again, you might ask why you didn't move the building forward, to the south. But we also had some parking requirements to deal with, and trying to get the standard size stalls. So we tried to accommodate that, and I think we ended up with a comment from Dave saying, let's try to see what we can do with the traffic vaults and try to relocate those below grade.
And could I ask you why it wasn't put on the south side of the building, a larger plaza area there?
There was a requirement for, I think, from planning to create kind of a corner because as people came down 56, they just wanted some sort of focal point. But you can see that we're kind of wrestling with a very busy corner of a traffic and trying to get some seating out there that a lot of times people don't want to sit right next to the busy traffic, so we got to get some kind of buffer. And so we got some grade changes going on there, plus we got landscaping, we got a trellis wall, and so we're kind of fighting one requirement for the other almost. And so, but yeah, if we could have gotten some out and made some room on the south side, that would have been ideal.
Would you have preferred to have the building a little further north and more area on the south
Well, we're
side?
pretty close to the intersection. I'm personally a little, as you move further to the north, the drive-through stacking room shortens up. And generally for these restaurants, you want about 8 car stacking, and we might have 3, 4 for taco time, sometimes more than that in lunch hour. But the further we move to the north, I think the shorter the stacking occurs. And so we're trying to lengthen that out so that any stacking tail would not come into the parking lot and block traffic.
Okay. I guess a question, Dave, so from staff's perspective, it sounds like, were you pushing to have a seating, the plaza area, community area on the north side instead of the south? Is that, if it changed around to the south, would that be acceptable? Or it seems like it would be on the sunnier side and.
Yeah.
I like that idea. Well, I guess the sidewalk looks kind of wide on the south side. What is that? Maybe it's not that wide, like, was it 6 or 8 feet out there? I mean, it's not a little tiny thing.
Yeah, it's about 8.
You almost have room to get some seating on the south side also. So at the north side, that is the corner of the streets. We were asking to put an architectural element at the corner and try and get the entrance at the corner. So now you got, the entrance to the building. It kind of makes sense then to have the plaza out there too. But I see what you're saying. Yeah, out in the sunshine on the south side and quieter away from the street is also an option.
Yeah, and I guess to me, that just seems like it's a boulevard type, people driving 45-mile-an-hour type street as opposed to a.
However,
Material.
we are going to have people walking to this place. There's the office buildings of
right across the
thousands
street.
of employees just north of 56th
Right,
Street.
right.
So there is, I think, a need for an entrance element there.
But maybe not necessarily the.
Maybe not
Community
necessarily
space.
the plaza, yeah.
Right.
I think also it came on, the bus drop is right there at the end of the circle drive. is where you have the Metro bus stop.
Uh-huh.
So the idea was to try to tie that in, so it wouldn't be so cold on that end of the building. So if you walk up, it's just a flat, no pedestrian area. The idea of trying to tie that in as well, so that when the Metro dropped off, there was the ability to walk down into the plaza or walk down into the shopping area.
Okay.
I think there's also flexibility in this code to say it's 20 by 20, but I think there's sentence, and flexibility is by the director or the commission to.
Squish that rectangle around.
Exactly. And maybe 3 small ones make 1 big one, but if we do that, they better be usable and not just these little tiny things you can't work with.
I agree.
So that's designated open space or community space. That's not leasable space for the restaurant? Okay, so they benefit because there's benches, picnic tables out there, but that's not something that's, so if somebody came off the bus and sat down and ate a Subway sandwich there, not a big deal. It's not associated with that.
Only if they get their drink at taco time.
Don't think they'd like that.
But that is the community space. That is not the tenant.
And then it also ties into the trail that comes through, so you can see the
Oh, yeah.
the little pathway that comes down, and then they have the access out to the trail and the sitting areas that were asked to be put out there as well.
I think in an ideal world, we'd see all three out of 4 sides of that restaurant building would be some kind of active public space, the public sidewalk, 221st in the south and the north side. All 3 of those should have something going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments on?
Was there a condition, Dave, that you wrote for the getting it to 20 by 20 or no?
I think I did.
And the 20 by 20, without getting out of scale and measuring it, is that the area just north of the building, the little walkway, and the area in the island as well? Is that all counting towards it?
It's the
So I think condition
this
4,
area right here.
compliance with community space.
The gridded pavement area.
And the one, so I missed that, sorry, the one in the island as well?
Oh, here?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think this turned out to be like 30 by 15 or 12.
Those 2 areas are
And then
definitely.
you do have, you're right, you have this area
You
also.
do. Mm-hmm.
And then up there and.
I mean, if you considered the walkway between it and those 2 areas, they're definitely over the 20 by 20.
It's not just the size area, right? It's more, the activity, the seating, the weather protection, all those different elements that make up a place where you'd want to be.
Okay, so Mel was just pointing out, the condition 4 that you wrote doesn't refer to the area in the north or the south. It does cover both. So I guess when you're talking with them, there may be, you could be talking about changes to that area to the north, but I honestly do believe with the 2 areas connected like that that's a pretty good space they've already provided.
Okay.
Anything else on?
And I'd like to say that, the demeanor of the conversations between, staff, Dave, and then the team has been, hey, can you take a look at this area? And we typically respond back to them. And so with that, I'm sure we could work something out once we identify some of the uses in that southern building there.
Okay. All right, thank you. David, go on to the next one.
So that was working through chapter 7, right?
Right.
I think like a public comment we heard earlier, we're finding that there are 2 design 2 chapters. Like community space has a chapter 7, and then the design one is chapter 13. And before you know it, they start coming together, and so we'll do our best here. So, what's next? Chapter 8 or
8.
8?
Yeah. So, again,
Chapter 8.
comments, any questions on on chapter 8? Questions, clarifications, comments? Parking?
Yeah, the bottom of where it starts, chapter 8,
Yeah.
is there a condition that states that those 4 stalls should come out?
Yes, there
Yes.
is.
I got a little lost.
remember writing it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Gotta
It was
be
tied,
here.
I think it was tied into the buffer increase, so. Sorry, but I'm not finding it real quick here. And if there's not, we should add one.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing it.
Okay.
I'm taking a quick look, I don't see it. Also, I'd like to ask the commissioners if they agreed with the staff recommendation that that buffer had to be maintained and those parking spots had to go.
Well, I guess what I wondered is that there's the drive lane, there's a buffer reduction area for the drive lane that's shown
A
there.
wetland buffer reduction, and the other one's a stream buffer.
Yes,
reduction.
that
That's
is,
a big
Oh,
difference, but
yeah.
it's
that's the difference, and that's being addressed through different code elements to allow that reduction, whereas the other one was kind of not there.
And this will not surprise anyone, but in answer to your question, I'm just antsy about cutting back on buffers to riparian areas. If it's a choice for me, if it's a choice between cutting back on a couple of parking spots, and I know how critical parking spots are to any development, or impacting the stream buffer, I go with the parking, reducing the parking spaces as opposed to further reduction of stream buffers.
Would you be more willing to if it was in exchange for keeping those parking stalls and taking some parking stalls off the street to provide the bike lanes on the street?
Yeah.
No,
No?
I don't think that, I think they're over the
Yeah.
recommended
yeah,
amount of parking.
They're over,
I think
they're over
they-
the.
Yeah, they're already,
Okay.
they are over, yeah.
They're over.
But I mean, if I had to, if we had to do that, that's what I do,
We
but
could
I
share the parking though.
The challenge is, I mean, in this particular instance, there's a way to rebalance this to accomplish compliance with what the standard is for the buffer and the parking, or getting it. I mean, you can be within bounds of the parking allowance for these uses based on the code. I mean, we're at the maximum, we're exceeded the maximum amount of parking. And at the same time, we're reducing the buffer. So for me, I'm in the camp of finding a balance that achieves the environmental protection that's provided by the buffers, but still finding compliance with parking standard. And I think that can be accomplished. I mean, it's a wide range of parking that's allowed between the maximum and the minimum, but it's a fairly, it's a pretty healthy parking count provided for this project.
So it doesn't have to be just a choice of it's this or that. I guess we could say, yeah, let's increase the buffer to the full width and then modify the parking layout as needed to meet that full buffer. And if there's a way to shift the parking around and some landscape islands and still keep the 3 stalls, but they're still over that limit also, so that has to come down.
David, I actually had an asterisk on this because I'm not quite clear on the wording. The proposal falls 3 stalls outside the parking median, maximum rather. Normally I would expect that to say falls 3 stalls short.
Sure.
But what you're saying is that it's 3 over?
Yes, the new code
Yeah.
says, puts a maximum, and on that table, right above it, says
Right.
total allowed parking range is 84 is the max.
Right.
We're showing 87. So, 3 stalls.
And they're willing to give up 4.
However you want to, write it better. But
All right, so help me out here. We're 3 stalls over the max.
Right.
You're cutting 4 for the buffer.
that's the proposal, yes.
So that would leave you 1 parking stall under the max?
In compliance, yes. Yep.
But it almost looks like you could, that 4th stall that would have to be eliminated is just a very small
I know.
portion that's in the buffer. Can the lanes be shifted a little bit just to be out of that and just take 3 out? And I guess that my thought would be, again, just like with the bike lanes, the idea if this is the first time we've put in maximum parking requirements, and I'd hate on a very first project to say,
We exceeded it.
let's go ahead and exceed it. 'cause
Yeah, yeah.
it goes
We're not
against it.
proposing to exceed it, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd agree with your
Okay.
recommendation, although I could see taking 3 out instead of the 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get it to.
Yeah, I think it should be a little more generic. We want the stream buffer restored. How they do it is up to them. If they
Yeah.
decide to lose 3 or 4 spots, whatever works easiest for them. But also there's, back to what Michael had said, is that if, depending on how you decide that street layout works with some sort of bike lane, there could be on-street parking right there. I mean, that's.
Yes.
I'm not opposed to the on-street parking. I'm opposed to eliminating the bike lane. So I think there's a couple of ways to get this done.
And I think the applicant also acknowledges, you still don't know what tenants are going in there, and we've talked some, and I've encouraged you all to pursue housing upstairs. If we can get some mixed use here, and let's keep that option open, so if you want to just bump up at the very max of the parking range, that keeps this development options open.
Sure.
Yeah.
But not beyond.
But not beyond,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
sorry.
Yes.
Point of clarification, I guess I'm having a hard time trying to understand why you have so many, so to speak, dead-end parking cluster. I counted 4. There's one on the south side of the building, and then there's like 3 that's on the north side of between the building and the taco time. Yeah, there's one right there, and then there's 3 over here.
Here.
Yeah, 1, 2, and then 3, and then there's, if you count the one on the west side of Taco Time, it's another kind of dead end. Why not have and then I think the site is being eaten up by the driveway, the drive-through parking lot, drive-through driveway checkout, and I don't mean to. If you redesign it, it's just kind of curious, you see all this space and you're so tight, and yet you have all this dead-end parking, and then you have this driveway that's eating up your space. And I don't, again, like I said, I don't mean to redesign your what you have here, but somehow it seems like there's a better way of citing your taco time. I remember it wasn't it Starbucks that was here earlier, one of the tenants, and that point came up, and the answer we got was that Starbucks wanted to be exposed up there in the corner. That's why they want it up there. Now it's taco time. Now is it taco time's requirement that they want it up there? So we talk about the number of stalls, and and we're over, and we have some allowance to play with and stuff like that. But it seems to me that there's a lot of driveway concrete that's eating up your space here. Maybe you designed it, looked at it, but I'm looking at it and I said, there's a lot of dead-end parking, Somehow your circulations, it's just not flowing well. So I don't know. I just want to throw it out, and I don't mean to muddy up the discussion here about giving up 3 and then giving up 4 parking stalls and stuff like that. But I just thought I'd throw it out and maybe get some comments from the architect or proponent.
Ray, I think one thing is that they mentioned earlier when they were talking about the drive-through, the fact that you want to give the cars, you have to have the people that are waiting enough space for them, and try to do that in an area in a way that doesn't impact the regular traffic, the non-drive-through. And when you look at this lot with that building there trying to get the maximum exposure to passersby, there really isn't a lot of option, it seems to me, about where you put the drive-through there, because you've got to have space for people to back up. They're not going to be moving very fast, so the sidewalk across there is not, is not going to be that hazardous, because they're going to be stopped anyways. So I just don't know if there's much of an option about where they could put, where they could alter the drive-through.
Well, again, I don't want to be the designer of this, but I just see a lot of conflict. You come in here, and then here you're driving through the driveway, and you have guys parking here, running into Taco Time, getting something out. Now, he's going to have to back out to get out this way. Meanwhile, you have a string of cars parked here waiting to move, and you need to back, and this guy, he needs to back in and then go out this way.
Yeah.
So that's an issue. Another one, you know, here you are coming in. You're coming in this way. Now, and then here's the guy who picked up his lunch. He's going to cross. So you have a crossing issue here. You know, the guy's going to come in. Now, is he going to get on the left-hand side? Because that's where he is. And this guy who picked up his lunch, he's trying to cross him to get out here. So you got a crossing issue here. And this one, he's going to back out and he's going to cut in while you're waiting. So there's a lot of conflict going on here. So that's one. And then, like I said, the original comment was there's a lot of dead-end parking cluster. So you probably looked at, and I guess I don't know why we couldn't, this rectangular building go this way and have your drive-through, just drive through here and then out this way, and then have all your parking right here in the middle. And you can just have your community space right there as you're driving through. I don't know, it's just a general idea, and, you know, I looked at it and I said, gee, you know, it's just a lot of conflict going on there. Don't mean to shoot it down, it's just not a very easy flowing design there.
We did ask for the drive-through lane to be in the back of the building, so that was a good thing.
Yeah, you could put the
Once you put it
drive-through
there, it's like-
on the south side of the building. If you turn this 90 degree and have it this way, you could have the drive-through on the south side of the building here, and pedestrian entry here.
But I guess there's stacking space needed before you get to the windows. Am I
Yeah.
answering the issues here? There's
Yeah,
not
you can
enough
come
room
in
there?
and, you know, have the stacking and then go out this way. But
Yeah.
So Chris Tonkin with Taco Time, co-applicant. I mean, that's a big question. There's a lot in there. One of the requirements as far as the drive-through, the city wanted to be hidden from view, didn't want to be kind of, sure, we would love to maybe have the drive-through wrap around the building, kind of this direction. That's the more traditional drive-through that we have in our system. This is kind of the direction we're going with having a zero setback. The buildings sit right on the road. As far as those dead-end stalls right there at the drive-through lane, we would designate that as employee parking, so they wouldn't be coming and going very frequently. We do see that potential conflict when the line is backed up, you know, during lunch. So we would designate those as employee parking. And then really the rest of the field of parking is not that much. Usually we have 45 stalls for a 2,700 square foot restaurant. This has 27 stalls. So we're actually, for a business model, this is kind of underparked. And we have cross-access parking with the larger building to make up for that. So I don't know if that helps. I mean, you have a logical idea where the drive-through would kind of wrap around, what would that be, the south side of the building. Another potential downside to that is all of the customers that are parking to dine in, they would have to walk across that drive-through lane. And we have 60% of our business go through the drive-through. It's pretty busy. We don't want our guests having to cross that drive aisle to access the restaurant.
I personally, the explanation that you can designate and use that as employee parking addresses a lot of my concerns. I agreed with Ray about the potential conflict.
Yeah, we see
people
the
backing
conflict,
out.
yeah.
But if that's going to be designated, and if it's going to be occupied by employees' cars, then that would significantly alleviate the concern that I would have about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Chapter 8. Any additional?
Someone has a placeholder about a condition on the 3 parking stalls, right? If we don't find the condition, we'll add one.
Yep.
Chapter 9
And there is a significant change in Chapter 9 from the past with the new standards in that under the new CIP chapter, as it says under discussion, under the new CIP sign chapter, sign review is completed at the staff level unless the applicant provides signage as part of the SDP. So that's different.
So that means we can skip this one. There are no signs.
Now, if it had been here, we could review signs tonight, but, you know, there's some conceptual signs in your package, but that's, I think, not at the level of detail that we're ready to talk about tonight.
And I presume, I think you still have the ability to bump it up if you thought
Yes,
necessary?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. You're right.
To gain the wisdom of.
To gain-
development.
And the experience.
Absolutely, and the experience, the vast experience.
Yes.
Okay, chapter 10 is landscaping, and we've talked about some of that already. As I look at the discussion here, something as I focused on where...
Dave?
Yeah? Really? Okay, talking to the microphone, sorry. The potentially invasive evergreen shrubs, there's a condition of that to swap them out, but still keep that kind of 3-foot-high landscape buffer around the parking lot. So this plan shows along 221st kind of a short hedge right here between the sidewalk and the parking lot. So I think that's where the Japanese holly is. So we'll find another substitute plant type for there. Right? Right. There are others. Yes. And then it talks some in here about tree sizes and the number of trees, but also the size of the trees. We're trying to shade the surface parking lot as much as possible. Some of these trees were medium-sized trees, and I'd like to push for as broad spreading canopy trees as possible. So there's a discussion in here to push those type of trees larger. There's a nice mix of different deciduous trees throughout, but push for the largest possible. And that is addressed in condition 8. Talks about 8A through F, some fairly detailed landscape conditions that again start folding into the landscape design chapter that's later on in the code, and these chapters kind of run together. So I think this is addressing a lot of those issues. Any comments on 10? If not,
Mr. Chair, quick question. And it's in, I believe, the staff report somewhere, but maybe if you could comment a little bit about the interface between the building and the sidewalk and what happens there, because just having a face of the building coming right down against the backside of the sidewalk with no
yes.
treatment is
Right.
a relatively harsh condition.
And
Is
where
that- I
did
think
that,
that comes up at 11.
is it 11
Oh,
that
yeah.
was there?
Oh, okay. Maybe
In
I'll wait.
terms of adding the greenery and so forth?
Yes.
Yeah, that's in 11.
It's in 11.
Okay,
Okay, good.
because I wanted to ask about that too.
And we're ready to go to 11. So shall we? Let's do that. Good timing.
Chair, I'd like to ask a question about the landscaping on
Oh, question. So.
The time is 9.
All right. Yeah, it's in chapter 11 as well as chapter 14 that further greenery is required between the building and the public sidewalk. I have to go to the code, but the essence is that even if the building's right at the street, we still want to get those planters, raised planters, some green element between the public sidewalk and the street. And that is a condition.
Okay. So that would consume part of the sidewalk width then is that, I'm figuring out what dimension gives here? And what are some example treatments? I'm looking in the design standards to see if I can find it.
I recall the plan showing like a 4 to 5 foot setback between the building and the sidewalk. Do you recall, or do you have plans in front of you there that show that? So even if it's at 0 feet, there's 6-inch, 12-inch pillars, usually in buildings that go in and out. And so, when it comes in, propose that that's an opportunity to put it on the private property, a strip of greenery, as well as perhaps extending out into that 8-foot sidewalk, maybe 6, 12, 18 inches. So
Is that, David, is that condition number 18? Prior to issuance of the building permit or other construction permits, the landscaping of the 221st and 56th planter strips shall be reviewed for compliance with the code, including section 12.6 landscaping?
That,
No, it's a
is that
different
it?
one. It's a
Number
different one.
13?
that's actually between the sidewalk and the street.
Or
That
is it-
plan.
is it-
Street
Is
wall
it
one.
13?
Yeah.
Yes, it's 13.
13?
Yes. 11.3F of the code that you received tonight.
Mm-hmm.
All right, were there questions or comments on additional questions or comments on chapter 11, clarifications?
Just, I guess to clarify too, that so that the planting along the building doesn't have to be continuous, right? It's
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It-
Thanks.
Just just in combination with architectural features, I mean, the idea is to make the pedestrian experience interesting. It doesn't always have to be plants, but it's a combination of the building architecture and other features and greenery, I think, to soften it a little.
And greenery, and you were talking earlier about the temporary, if you want to put some chairs and tables out there, you've got that activity as well.
Yeah,
It's all that combination of activity through there.
yeah.
Shall we go to 12,
12, yes.
circulation?
Well, circulation, we've
Pretty much,
covered through bike lane discussion,
and
as well as
community space, 13?
making sure that planter strip, that you highlighted that condition earlier, we really want to review that planter strip, and I guess I'd like to compliment the applicant. You've got a nice landscape strip design. It's not just a strip of street trees and grass. There's some, you got some boulders in there for seating and some steps and benches, and good start. So you're on to 13?
No, I have a question. So this trail, the
Okay.
wetland trail,
Yeah.
is that under top circulation?
Yes. And I can talk about that. Or do you have specific questions?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the connection at the south end of the site that goes to the adjacent parcel.
Uh-huh.
Is that just, what if maybe we get a trail all the way along, or
Yes, it is.
it is?
It is. And the River and Streams Board discussion talked about the idea of, hey, why are we having this whole trail back here?
Yeah.
And maybe you want to consider just those walkways that head east-west, perpendicular out from the parking lot, 1, 2, and then 3 down at the, right here.
Mhm.
You could just have those 3, and that's it. But hey, let's keep our options open. Someday, maybe development will occur south of there, and you come right off 56th Street here. You can have this trail just continue there and have that option open.
Yeah.
56.
Yeah.
That was really good. I also like the fact that it does come back into the parking area.
Your mic.
Oh, sorry, back into the parking area, more or less towards that community open space. Not that one, but the one at the south end of the building. And I'm just wondering if when you review that community space area, if there's an opportunity for something in the open community space that maybe is either information about the trail or a bench
Marker.
area, or covered area, something that somebody who walks and can't continue their walk will then end up crossing and going into that community space, and there's another little feature that ties it back to the trail or something like that. It's not painted, there isn't a designated walkway across. Is that just missing on the plan? Because they've shown the other walkways, right?
There's just not a walkway shown right across, there's one right here, but not one
And
right
at the
here.
other, at the north end.
Did you have a problem putting one there? I don't think so, right?
Because that's what's going to happen if the trail doesn't
You're
go
gonna come off
south. They're
here.
going to come into that public area, so there should be a walkway across
Yeah.
there, painted walkway.
Yeah. Sounds good,
Should we add that as a condition?
if you'd like. And were you talking about wayfinding signage? Was that, did I hear
Just
that?
anything, I mean, if there's some, the way the community spaces read in the code that you gave us tonight, it's supposed to somehow be a community space, not just an empty paved area with a bench on it. So if there's an opportunity to add in something else, either that points the direction to that wetland trail, or a little sign that says that there's additional seating or viewpoints or something, that community space area would be a good place to put that.
Okay.
And just an additional thought on that, because we have that buffer right there, it might be a nice opportunity to make some connection between some landscaping and the crossing right there to that trail. So, I mean, the idea that, I mean, obviously with that community space, you're going to need to do more than just a concrete slab with chairs on it, because the code requires that, and that's a condition that you're going to look at that and you're going to add some additional features there.
Yes, we are.
So I think it's a good point. I think it's a good opportunity to enhance that space, the connectivity back over to the stream corridor.
I agree with everything. I just would add a cautionary note. It seems to me that as obvious as the need is to designate a crossing there, as we've been discussing here, I'm still a little bit leery about traffic entering that site. Now, I understand the edge of the building. I'm looking at line of sight from somebody coming in off 221st, and they're driving in there. I don't know how high that landscaping is going to be up there, right there exactly. But if somebody's coming, if that's high, if it blocks vision, then that could be really bad. Because somebody coming across there, even if they look over their shoulder, they might not see a car coming, and certainly somebody driving a car might not see the pedestrian. So I think that we're going to have to be real careful here about designating a crossing area where there is going to be a sharp turn required of every car that enters that. Now, that said, I think that keeping the path or having a path in there is kind of congruent with what we were talking about earlier about the bike lanes. I mean, we're trying to encourage this. Trying to encourage both bike and pedestrian traffic. So I think the idea of having it there and then having the implicit, if not explicit, expectation that whoever does anything with the adjacent parcel is going to be looking at, a path that's there, and it's going to be pretty hard to explain why they're not going to continue it unless, so long as there's space to do it. And I understand that the further you get along on that, the less space there is. So it may be a moot point, but that said, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. I agree. And just another point, if I can just add, is that it's the same thing with folks park on the southwest of the lot. They park there, they walk across to get to the building. You have people crossing there. And I guess when you drive into the lot, drive into the development, you slow down and there's a lot of folks crossing. And you have a lot of folks on the west side park. They have to cross also.
Yeah, and Ray, that's a good point. I mean, slow is the issue there, because I just, recent experience with Issaquah traffic, people drive a little bit faster than maybe they used to. The other thing is those parking lots that are being taken out there. If somebody pulls into those parking lots, let's say you park there, and now you're going to leave and you're going to back out, and you're backing out right into the face of entering traffic. So I think if you're going to adjust the parking in there accordingly, as we were talking about earlier, those are good ones to remove, because it'd be pretty challenging to back out right into the face of oncoming traffic.
Another point of clarification, David, this community space that we're providing on the southwest corner of the building, that's for the building. Is that for one tenant, or if there are 3 tenants that comes in, do they each have to have their own community space? How does that work?
I don't think we've declared explicitly. I saw it as just one for that whole building, and people would share. So whatever activities are happening in the building, you can leave and head outside and
Uh-huh,
be outside.
okay. So we don't really know if they come in, I mean, it's possible they can have 3 or 4 tenants coming in, and only the one on the south end would have that community space to use then. If it's a retail then, or a restaurant, that's, they can use it.
I would see it being available for all the tenants, so say a restaurant couldn't come in there and rope it off and say, this is ours. It's more of a public, anyone on the property should be able to use that space.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, some thoughts needs to go in there, because right now we're looking at one building and one tenant. But,
Several tenants, we don't know what the tenants are yet.
right,
Right.
yeah, so we're at a disadvantage, trying to address this community space. That's.
Dave, I
Thank you.
had one question going back to, sorry to do this, but in the environmental review, I noticed that Mr. Rosen's comments, in the comments that were included in the staff report, everything was, there were a couple recommendations, but is there, are you aware of any federal law protection of eagles that have any impact on construction, how close to an active nest you can get or anything like that? The reason I ask is because there is a nest there that has had a nesting pair. It's on the other side of the, well, you know what? I don't know if I think it's on the other side of the creek, but it's right there.
I don't know the specific things. I'm aware of rules of that nature.
Yeah, I didn't see it addressed anywhere in here, and a lot of people don't even know it's there, but they're sitting on it right now.
And I know some of those nests are known by certain people around the
Yep.
city, and they're purposely kept quiet of
Yep.
where those are.
Yep. I just wondered, because I know where I used to live, there was a tremendous amount of controversy about construction too close to a nesting pair.
Good point, yeah.
And people professed ignorance about it until it was, the earth movers were already in there. And I just didn't see it mentioned in there.
Well, it's a good point to raise. I've seen it come up on other projects in the city.
Okay.
So
All right.
I think we should be aware of it, and if it applies, we'll apply it.
Okay. So.
Chair, I had a question about
Yes, sir.
circulation.
Sure.
That's okay. David, you raised a question about continuing the walkway from the southern building to Taco Time.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess I was curious, maybe a question for the applicant, why that wasn't continued through there. And is there some reason?
We saw the
that we're
sidewalk
not-
right here, and it's a nice sidewalk. And then you want to head over to just kind of question. We had that discussion in our staff too, and kind of debated whether to do that or not. I think we could go either way. It's not that hard for a person to walk from here to here, but
Would
Right,
it,
just thinking since it's already there on one part, to do it on the other would, I guess, if that works to connect them into.
any issue?
Mel, are you talking about taking it across in the middle of the parking right there? Not only
Right
across
here,
the entrance,
yeah.
but
And then
continue
through here.
Yeah.
I'm Howard Kimura again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that this design here, connectivity from the southern to the northern building, I don't think was discussed, in our meetings, but I know the space in there, you can kind of see it's absolute minimum clearances for parking stalls and depth, and then the aisles. And so, if we did accommodate that, we'd probably lose maybe, at least one row along the Taco Time side, and then possibly the stalls. I think, are we at the maximum for our compact stalls on the design, Kevin? Yeah, we were toying around with the compact stalls and all that, and I don't think we're at the maximum yet, but The last person to work on that might know that. But we'd probably lose those 5 stalls there, and then maybe maybe 4 stalls along the north side of the southern building.
I'm sorry,
accommodate that.
or are you saying that if you did what Commissioner Morgan is suggesting, it would result in that? Is that?
Yeah, I think what he was suggesting is maybe a walkway that would connect the, a walkway that would connect the southern building
Yeah.
all the way to the taco time.
Right.
Yeah, and what I was saying is that strip there, I think, is only about, I think it's no more than 3 feet. It's a very narrow strip.
Right.
Yeah, and so to widen that up to, say, we got overhangs for cars at 2 feet, or maybe those are deep enough for parking stalls, we'd probably have at least a 4-foot clear minimum, sidewalk. So it might reduce these stalls, and then right here, we'd probably lose those stalls there.
What is, if I may ask?
Yeah.
Is that right now? Is that a sidewalk?
I think that's concrete right now. It's just a wheel stop. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I don't think we've gotten into the detail of, that depth right there might be a medium, or that looks like a compact there. You don't see any Cs on here yet, but that looks like a compact. That might be a full or medium. But ultimately, there'll be some wheel stops there just to stop the car, because I don't think that's wide enough to stop the car before they hit each other there.
Okay, because maybe David, you had the same thought that was actually a sidewalk
I did
or
too.
walkway that went out. So if it's not that, and then I would presume then people can actually walk on the sidewalk from building to building.
Yeah, we initially thought,
There's this lovely sidewalk, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
So,
thank you.
okay.
Well, all right, so 13, is there anything else in Chapter 13, Community Space, or should we proceed to 14, Buildings?
Go to buildings, right?
All right, 14. Questions, clarifications, anything sought from commissioners on with regard to that? Now, let me deviate from the norm here. When David and I met earlier this week to talk about the process for this, one of the things that David told me is the philosophical change in the way things were done. David, would you want to expand that with regard to the level of detail that is now going to be presented and the responsibility or the area of inquiry for the Development Commission in the past as opposed to what's being proposed now?
Well, I guess the proposal, we're still working through this,
Yeah.
and it's not official or anything yet, but it's an evolution from the 90s through the 2000s till now, and part of this whole code update was to streamline the process and have the commission look at the conceptual elements and look at the intent, concepts, and then to turn the detailed reviews over to the staff level. So that's an idea that we've been working on, and that ties into the streamline elements that we heard throughout the adoption of this plan and the standards. So that's where I'm coming from.
And then that would be presented to the Development Commission in this meeting when it proceeds, or actually in the community conference as well. So there would be a presentation so the commissioners would know that they're proposing to use fieldstone here, and these are would we even have an opportunity to, under this new plan, to be made aware of that, or what is being proposed, or how does that work? Because I think a lot of times a significant amount of the Development Commission discussion has been over the appearance of the appearance of the buildings, the structures, the materials that are used, and have you given some thought to using?
We have, and I think the thought is to still show the materials, the colors, the designs, and then if the commission is comfortable with the approach, you'd say, yes, this looks good. Staff, go ahead and finalize the detailed review of it. Or like we're looking at community space tonight, we see that plaza there with a couple benches, but we're not showing the exact final plan, and we'd like to step towards more of this concept you see here, and then have us finalize it at the building permit construction phase.
So would the commission be given, as we were in the past, examples of materials that would be used? Would that be part of the thing?
I think it
In
still
going
can
forward
be. It
as
can
well?
be, and it's
Okay.
not, again, we're working through this ourselves. We have a week set aside in June for the staff to look at the entire permit process and ways to.
1 week.
5 full work days.
And
It's gonna hurt.
And it will
It's
be
gonna be
very
good.
efficient when you're finished with that 5 full days. I think this is kind of a transition period, obviously, and we're going to, have to kind of find the new norm.
Right.
I think what you've done with this staff report, and obviously we're stumbling around a little bit because it's our first time working through this, and understandable. But in reading the conditions, I just made some notes in the margins about these are very generally written conditions, very different than the way staff reports and conditions were previously done, which were very specific. And it talks about, that you'll meet the standard as described in, like, for instance, the community space, for example. And I think I'm okay with that, but I guess we're going to need to have experience as we go along here to feel like there's being value added from the input of the commission. So I guess one thought, and since we're going off track here just a little bit, but bear with me, it would be nice to have some projects loop back in their finished state, their permitted state, and just to show us how did it end up, so that we have, I guess we start to develop confidence in the end product is actually achieving what we were intending to achieve. So that might be a helpful exercise.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Help the transition, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I'd like to add, if I was kind of pressed for time on this one, and I really would have liked to have more details in these conditions. These are very general conditions. So
But we're going to end up
Sorry about that.
afterwards maybe talking a bit about, not in the hearing, but afterwards about format. 'Cause that was one thing I noted, that a little more detail in the conditions, a little more direction.
Come on, Dave.
Okay.
You had 2 days that the code's been in play now. I mean,
Hey,
it's 48 hours. How much more time do you want?
Okay, all right.
But I agree with Michael. We're not going to see it tonight necessarily, but it would be nice as a learning tool to see some of these at the end.
And I
give
just
us some
wanted to,
ideas of how they address.
I just wanted my fellow commissioners to understand what David told me about the tendency to get more into, here's what we're going to do you approve, as opposed to detailed discussions about it. Okay, so, chapter 14.
On 14.5, I don't really have a question. I just noted that I'm glad you're talking about weather protection. I guess one thing I would like you to make sure is that however these community spaces end up, if there are features, that you consider some sort of weather protection for the features, maybe a canopy over a table or whatever, but weather protection, not just in and around the building, but in these community spaces, if it makes sense.
Okay. I was reading the code a bit ago. It talks about pergolas, gazebos, and roofed things like that, right? Yeah.
I had just a general question on 14.4, I guess it is, on the kick plate, moving it to 24 inches from 9 inches. I was just curious about the design standard, the thought from, retail space design and the 9-inch kick plate versus the 24, and is that a big issue or not? Or it sounded reasonable to me, but I was.
Yeah. For this rendering here, got that little blue thing down there.
Let's see if I understood the question correctly. This is Howard Kimura again. Down here, I guess I can't point to this.
The mouse works.
Oh, so is this the kick plate you guys are referring to, going from, say, 24 down to 9?
No, I think the staff said to increase it from 9 to 24. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, actually, the reason we usually raise it up there is if you go less than 18 inches, you get tempered glazing. So we usually put the panel 15, which is a solid panel, or tempered glass on the bottom, and then the top part doesn't have to be tempered, and it's a lot more cost to do that. But if you actually go in the middle of that and say 9 inches, for example, and then you have glass on top and bottom, or maybe you have a 9-inch curb or something, kick plate, and then you have glass on top, then the entire panel's got to be tempered. And so it's a lot more cost for developers to do that. So in the code, and it gets down to a building code issue, we usually make that minimum 18, sometimes 24, and then put a panel 15, a solid panel in there, or, you know, tempered glass, and then put regular glass on top, unless it's within 24 inches of an arc of a door, then it's tempered glass as well.
So what David has recommended is better, because he was saying your elevations have 9 inches, and
Oh, is that on the southern building there?
on the southern building. yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was done by a different architect, but, yeah, that was probably a different approach that they had, and sometimes they do that, and they just put the tempered glass in there, and it's a safety feature, so that in case anything hits it, you know, the glass is not going to topple onto people walking by. And they might have done that purposely too, but I know typically when I do storefronts, I'll try to avoid that just for cost reasons, and that's the only reason. It's just a building code issue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
It sounds like it works.
so it sounds like it works better 18 to 24 anyway, so,
Yeah, it's a nice number there, so.
okay.
Yeah, it's just the plans didn't show it. I guess the rendering shows something.
The plans
but
did.
didn't show it.
Yeah, so, okay.
Okay. Anything else on chapter 14? If not, we'll go to chapter 15, parking. Is there anything additional to be discussed about parking, concerns, suggested conditions?
Well, I think under 15.4, I'm going to propose a condition that talks about marking out that pedestrian connection in the south end a little better.
Between the two buildings?
No, between the trail
Your
and the-
mic.
oh, sorry. Between the trail and the building.
Oh, okay. Anything else? On 14, or I'm sorry, 15? Shall we go to 16? Landscape? And you've talked about, in 16.2, you've talked about the greater use of native plants should be the goal to show the transition from native to the built environment. And that's part of the requirement that you, and part of the recommendations you've made, correct? In their recommendation?
And I haven't said that the entire buffer is being, well, I don't know, the entire, a large part of the buffer is being enhanced, planted with native plants, and that's in the SEPA determination that's attached to the.
And in 18, recommendation 18, is the landscaping of the 221st and 56 planter strips shall be, so it's all the, is there another one in there that, well, we'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Actually, David, do you know where these are referred to in the conditions? I don't see references to I see 16.3 fence standards in the conditions, but I'm not seeing the other one.
Condition 20. Condition 20 is,
Well, it says 16.3, but you were talking about the greater use of native plants, blah, blah, blah.
oh,
I don't see that one.
okay.
Should be the goal to show the transition from native to
Yeah.
built environment, but I don't see a reference to
Okay,
that in
so
the condition.
we expand, add that to condition.
Well, I think that condition's fine on its own. I'm just wondering if you need another one that refers specifically to the use of the native plant, increase in native plant use.
Okay.
Anything else on chapter 16? All right, we'll go to 17, the last chapter there.
I didn't see a lot of detail on the lighting fixtures, so I didn't spend much time on that, frankly.
I would assume that the objective of the new standards is to mitigate overflow of lighting into adjacent properties, certainly into the creek. We don't want any
None.
lighting to go into the creek at night because of the salmon, obviously. So that's part of the code, right?
And we have that today, in today's code. And that would continue to
Yeah.
the new central
Okay.
plan standards, yes.
Anything else on lighting? Let there be light at the end of the tunnel. All right. All right, with that, with the chapters being covered and the opportunities for comment and questions having taken place, I believe we are at the point at which staff will make their recommendations to us, after which would be, I think the way we're going to do this is you're going to go ahead and read each one of these, right? Which is this kind of similar to the green sheet process, is that, are we, we're going to do
I
that?
think that's.
Do we need to
Do
do
we need
that?
that?
I
Well,
don't
do you,
think it's necessary.
We go to a motion?
Yeah.
well, we can go, certainly.
I think
If you think you know, if you've got, if you've had time, I mean, absolutely.
I guess after having gone through the process, my thought is that people have been taking notes on additional conditions or
Yep.
maybe even marking on conditions they don't agree with. And if we're not required to approve it section by section, I think we should just move and go to modifying the conditions they have.
Yep. So we can move to approve and then move to approve conditions.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the permit application for Issaquah Plaza 221, application numbers PLN 12-00065-67, and the following 22 conditions.
A second?
Any discussion? All those in favor of the
Oh,
motion? I'm sorry.
Maybe some
Conditions.
Oh,
conditions.
is there going to be a second?
Yeah.
Mary Lou seconded.
I
Then maybe
seconded.
I'm
we
sorry.
have Conditions,
A
yeah.
second
But before, yeah, do we not need?
set
to-
of, we approve and then we approve the condition, subject to the conditions and then the conditions?
Well,
It
I think
doesn't
like
have to.
Like a regular, we would just, in discussion, somebody could say, here, I think we should add condition 23 that would state, and so forth.
All right.
So it's been
Yeah,
seconded
we
and
can-
moved, and
Second,
now it's
now
open
it's
for discussion, right?
Open for
Yeah.
discussion.
Okay,
And then
that makes sense.
So, is there discussion of the motion as made and seconded?
Yes. We want to add
Commissioner
some
Pollak.
conditions. Okay.
You start with the bicycle.
Okay, so I would like to propose that we add a condition dealing with the inclusion of bike lanes. Prior to the issuance of the building permit, applicant to revise plans to include a 3 to 5 foot wide bike lane by reducing or eliminating the parking, reducing the landscape median, and/or reducing the sidewalk width.
Second.
Is there a discussion?
So, make sure I understand, I think I got it. So it is, the bike lane, you're saying modify the dimensions between all the major features, the sidewalk, parking, which could be eliminating the parking, and the bike lane itself to accomplish inclusion of the bike lane. So the bike lane could go from 5 to 3 feet, the sidewalk could go from, let's say, 8 to 6.
I guess that you're very close. The parking could stay or go. I don't care about the on-street parking. But then the other two, we need to have a sidewalk. And we
Right.
need to have a median, but they could be smaller. So any combination of all three of those, don't really care, don't have a preference, just
Okay.
find us the bike lane.
Can I ask Dave a question? On the standard-wise, there are some that are fairly well, they're fixed, and we don't have a lot of, opportunity to move them around, and others that are more flexible. Are there any of these dimensions that are fixed in code that, for some particular reason, that we shouldn't be
Playing with them.
playing with them?
Or we just don't have the option?
No, I think we have some, there's some minimums. I mentioned 4 feet
Right.
for landscaping. ADA for sidewalks is
Right.
44, which we're not even close to.
Yeah,
So,
we have the room on these, okay.
And the other way to word the condition is to just say, add a bike lane, and not give them any direction on how to do it. Not sure what kind of outcome you would get from that, but to be less prescriptive.
No, I like the more prescriptive
too.
approach.
Oh, okay. I
do too.
Saying, let's not just take it from one or the other, let's find the right combination that makes sense for maximizing all of all of the interest.
And I agree, and I think we need to indicate very clearly that we want them to consider options.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're all important.
One question, you mentioned a 3 to 5 foot bike lane, and Dave, you said the city standard is a 5 foot bike lane.
It's 5, yeah.
So do we want to, I guess I get concerned about saying, well, let's skinny it down to less than what the city standard. Do we want to just say inclusion of a bike lane?
And can I add, like, option for a bike lane? Because right now, I'm hearing from those more bike experts, you don't want to have a bike lane to nowhere. So this project could be built, and 100 feet down the road, to the next parcel, there's no bike lane. So
Yeah.
right now, we just might want a lot of
Right.
wide pavement. You know what I'm saying?
I'll reword it. What I don't want to happen is that one of the options is that we don't do it. I want to word it in a way that we get the space, but don't necessarily mark it as a bike lane until the other pieces are there, but it is wider there. But I don't want to not get a bike lane at all. So, and I don't have an issue with taking out the 3 to 5 and just saying a bike lane, if everybody else thinks that's.
So would we be saying then the combination of road lane and bike lane shall be 15 feet? Is that what you're looking for, Dave? Or? Because I agree, I don't think we want to say, well, let's make it just 2 feet wider in the road and we can fit a bike lane in later possibly and not have it happen.
Well, I believe the intent of the commission is to make it very clear that we want a bike lane on this street in front of this parcel that we're considering. So the objective, I believe, is to provide the staff with guidance that is very explicit, or as explicit as we can make it, that is it is a desire of the commission that there will be a bike lane here.
So could it be stating, including a bike lane or room for a bike lane?
Okay, and I had include appropriate right-of-way width to
Accommodate.
a bike lane or future bike lane, so they
That
don't
works.
have to mark it.
That works.
Okay.
Okay. Could you read it again, Mary Lou?
1
How
second.
wide, how wide is the bike lane?
Well, they'll-
5 feet.
And they'll figure it out.
Or a future, okay. Prior to issuance of the building permit, applicant to revise plans to include appropriate right-of-way width to include a bike lane or future bike lane by reducing or eliminating the parking, on-street parking, reducing the landscape median, and/or reducing the sidewalk width.
And the second agrees with that.
Any further discussion?
No, we're not specifying how wide the bike lane is.
Nope.
No.
We're not.
No.
We're just saying bike lane.
Gotta have it.
Right. Because the city standard is 5 feet, and what we don't want to do is get into
Recommending
reducing the
something like
size or recommending that there's a deviation from the city standard for this. So if they can accommodate it by doing the other things, then that's what we're recommending. Okay?
Okay.
So we have a second, we have an amendment, we have an agreement to it. Is there any further discussion? All right. Do we vote on the approval list? So all those in favor of the amendment as presented by Commissioner Pauly indicate by saying aye.
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 It's unanimous. Be included. Commissioner Morgan, do I?
Do you have another one, Mary Lou?
I have a bunch, but you
No,
guys
go ahead.
No, you guys,
No,
no, you
no,
guys
no,
go get
you're
the
the-
same one.
you're the
No, you
best.
guys.
So while you guys are arguing, can I get clarification?
Right ahead.
Yes,
Really
indeed.
quick on 12, I'm just wondering about the wording of a condition 12. It kind of, maybe I'm just missing it, but at the end it says, revise as needed to address specific measures in site design, and it refers to the sections, and then it has in parentheses recommended design elements, and then recommended, or then parentheses again, prohibited, and just, the prohibit is just hanging there. I don't know what that means.
So those are the subtitles of those two sections. That's why they're.
The specific reference to those sections of the code. Okay.
Section 7 is recommended design elements. Section 8 is prohibited.
Okay, great. I should have looked up the
Prohibited
code.
what? I don't know. You know, we could find out, but.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
thanks, that helps. Okay.
Actually, can I ask a question of staff first before I propose one condition? Connie had brought up a point that there was something in there that talked about maintaining areas for 5 years. That's more or less, isn't that more about plant survival and all of that?
Yeah.
So what does this, there's this trail in there, is what makes the property owner make sure blackberries don't grow over the trail in year 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever?
Well, so there'd be, this is in the, we would require a native growth protection easement, the
okay.
NGPE.
And that would be a
And the
condition
stock
of
wording in there is maintained in perpetuity.
okay, perfect.
And we have Michelle Faulkner, our capable code enforcement officer.
Okay.
She'll come out there and,
Okay, I had a second condition to add. It had to do with parking in the south end of the site. Prior to issuance of the building permit, revise parking in the southwestern corner of the site to maintain the 100-foot stream buffer.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
And I guess one question here, do we want a separate condition to say reduce parking to the maximum number of
Oh,
allowed
good
stalls?
point. I think those are
Which
two
could be
separate
two separate
things.
Yeah.
I really think they
Yeah,
are.
because there is
Kind of
there's a
combined
parking-
here,
yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, further discussion?
Yeah.
Did-
we need her to speak slower so we can write it down.
Okay. Could you read it again, please?
Sure. Prior to the issuance of the building permit, revise parking in the southwestern corner of the site to maintain the 100-foot stream buffer.
Okay, thanks.
So, discussion?
I guess one question on the site plan, it appears that part of the drive aisle, that corner also encroaches onto the
Wetlands.
The
75
buffer.
foot buffer. This one?
No,
down there.
here,
Yeah, it is 75 foot. It
No,
does.
he's looking at the
at the very,
The taco time one.
no, at the very, where those parking stalls are that would be
Eliminated?
eliminated, there's part of that buffer that goes into what's shown as drive aisle area.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
A
So-
lit- I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
But a literal application of this, of the condition that was just described would say modify the parking, that's a drive lane. I mean, we don't want to create an unsafe condition in the drive lane, and there's not a lot of opportunity, and a quick look at the dimensions here, to carve out the drive lane. That might be problematic, I think.
It would definitely be problematic.
Uh-huh.
So, but the idea is, we were trying to accomplish, if I remember the discussion, we don't want to give on the buffer where there's opportunity, where it doesn't require an exception.
Right.
There was no compelling need for an exception because
They were
they're
overparked.
overparked, but I think the drive lane would be an issue.
That's a really good point. Actually, I would like to withdraw the condition and either I can or someone else put the parking and the buffer together in such a way that the condition does allow an encroachment for the drive lane only, so that we're not changing the whole circulation pattern here.
You could say, except for, in the condition you just wrote, except for
Okay.
where necessary to ensure
Okay,
safe
safe
vehicular
that's good.
circulation.
So we'll modify the condition
Yeah.
along the lines of what Commissioner Brennan just
You can
suggested.
repeat that back.
Yeah.
And so we'll read it back to you as modified.
Michael, did you say except where necessary to ensure safe vehicle?
Vehicular circulation.
Circulation.
Yeah.
Prior to the issuance of the building permit, revise parking in the southwestern corner of the site to maintain the 100-foot stream buffer, except where necessary to ensure safe vehicle circulation. It's a little tricky.
It was a clunky one.
Yeah.
How would I change that?
Don't second it.
Great.
Safe parking, 100-foot stream buffer.
Okay? You're on a roll, Mary.
No, I'm actually not sure if that reads properly. Was it seconded? I don't know if it was seconded.
Well, it was modifying the, oh, did you withdraw the other?
Site to maintain the 100
yeah.
I didn't withdraw.
No,
Nobody
she
seconded
didn't.
it. Require the site to maintain the 100-foot stream buffer with a should say with an exception.
With an
With an
exception.
exception in the, with an exception in the drive lane where necessary to ensure safe vehicle circulation?
That would be fine.
Okay.
I mean, that would,
With an exception, can't even read anymore, it's getting a mess. An exception in the drive lane where necessary to ensure safe vehicle circulation. Okay, I like that better. So keeping a little piece of the drive lane is actually in the back.
Okay, so let's read it again, make
Sure.
sure that we've got it right on the record.
Prior to issuance of the building permit, revise parking in the southwestern corner of the site to maintain the 100-foot stream buffer with an exception in the drive area where necessary to ensure safe vehicle circulation.
Okay.
and I was the second to the original motion, or if that's a new motion, I'll second the motion.
All right.
Either way we've got it.
Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries as amended.
Can we do the reduced parking?
Mr. Chair, I move we add condition 25 that would state, prior to issuance of the building permit, applicant shall reduce the number of parking stalls to the maximum allowed per section 8.0.
Second?
Discussion?
Does that work, David?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Very clear.
Discussion? All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Any additional conditions?
I'm still writing one for the employee parking, actually.
Oh, okay.
If you have another one, go ahead.
So Chair, I move we add condition 26, which states, prior to issuance of the building permit, applicant shall include markings for a pedestrian crossing from the southernmost extension of the trail to the community area on the south side of the southern building.
Second that.
Discussion? In favor? Indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Unanimously carries.
Can you repeat that again, please? Or could you read it back and see if?
That's easier.
You okay reading it back or shy?
I got, okay.
Prior to issuance of the building permit, the applicant shall include marking for a pedestrian crossing from the, what,
Southernmost
southernmost,
extension of the trail
southernmost extension of the trail
to the community space at the south end of the southern building.
Got it. South end of the south building. Okay.
Okay, now that we
Thanks.
approved it, I have a question about this.
Nope, there's no back, sorry.
There was a question about the landscape in that area, and that if we were proposing that crossing, did we also need to point out that the landscape in the community space needs to be designed in such a manner as not to create a poor visibility for that crossing, or
I guess my thought is that's just sort of a, seems like a standard
they would be doing
operating.
that anyway?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Safe traffic, sight distance.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, and I would also
Maintenance.
hope that since we specifically cited that it would be recorded as a concern.
I had another condition to add, and it's prior to the issuance of the building permit. Parking stalls located west and south of the drive-through lane shall be labeled as employee parking only.
Discussion?
There needs a second.
Second? Okay.
Now you can change
Can I
it.
ask
Sure.
what issue we're trying to address by that particular condition? I mean, that's pretty restrictive, so I'm just kind of concerned about what we're trying to accomplish.
And it may not be absolutely necessary because the applicant already said he was going to do it. He said he was going to do it. So in that case, if you don't see the benefit in it, then maybe we don't have to be so restrictive.
I think there's a benefit because it's more stable. You don't have as many people coming and going from that particular segment of the parking. It just feels, now we're starting to manage distribution of parking within a parking lot. And other than just for like barrier-free stalls, that's relatively unusual for a site like this because things can change as they settle into the buildings and how the building, the tenants change, and then suddenly now they've got a condition on the record.
That's only employee parking.
And then how do they enforce that? And it becomes a bit of a challenge for the city too to enforce it.
Yeah.
Only?
So my sense is it's a little overly restrictive that may have an unintended consequence that we don't understand. And I think their operating procedures may create that, and that may be just adequate. That's adequate for me.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, I'm fine with that. I can withdraw the condition if the second agrees.
You know, and also, along this, I don't know how, I'm sorry, Ray, go ahead.
yeah, well, just to put another point to those, the issue was the conflict that we have at that point. And we were assured by the applicant that those are just for employees parking. So we're taking that and then just putting it in as an amendment. So I don't think we're being restrictive in what, this is something that the applicants has proposed. Or we could go and relook at the conflict of traffic that's at that point and do a revisit the whole circulation of that area and see how it comes out. And which I don't think we want to do that. And so that's, to me, that's sort of like we brought it up, the applicant says those parking stalls are for employee, and we just put it down as that's what it is. So that's the other point that I was trying to get. Thank you. So, you know, to kind of dovetail into what Mary Lou's amendment, I guess I would like to have that in there and not withdraw it.
I don't have to withdraw it. We can vote on it.
Yeah.
If people have an opinion that they think it's too restrictive, they'll vote against it. And if they want it, they'll vote for it.
Well, David, I have a question for you. To Mike's, Commissioner Brennan's point, if these are designated, if we go through with this as an amendment and require the designation of those parking places as reserved for employees, what is the lingering effect of that if Taco Time eventually goes somewhere else, doesn't use that building? I mean, I think, is that the spirit of what you were saying, that we're not allowing the tenants to have the flexibility if we mandate that those are designated as employee parking and there's a subsequent change and the subsequent tenant doesn't particularly want to have those things blocked for employees?
Right.
What is the city's position with regard to enforcement of it?
Right. I mean, city enforcement's a challenge. I think limiting the flexibility in how parking is utilized on the site. Maybe they don't need them all for employees and they want to have them for customers because the customer demand is higher than anticipated. I mean, there are a lot of things that are, like I said, unintended consequences that could come from being overly restrictive in conditions. So I understand the safety concern. If it becomes a safety issue, the property owners have a liability and an obligation to deal with that safety concern, which could mean they figure out a way to manage that parking to minimize the risks. But I'm feeling, personally, for me, that's reaching a little farther than we should, just because I'm afraid of, like I said, the unintended consequence. So, I mean, we can vote on the motion. We can choose.
Is it the desire of the commission to hold a vote on whether we proceed with this amendment or not?
I don't think we have a choice, do we, unless it gets...
Well, all right.
Drawn by
All right. So, those in favor of including the amendment requiring the designation of these spaces as being reserved for employees, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay?
Nay?
Nay. Nays have it.
All right.
Okay. Are there any other further conditions to be proposed?
Yeah, I think David mentioned that there was nothing in the conditions that dealt with changing and adding the more native plants to the palette. Do we need to propose something around that? Did anybody find something in there
No,
that would lead to
I
that?
didn't, Meredith.
And where in the report, David, did you have your words? Because you might just pirate them.
Yeah,
It's in 14, landscaping. I think it's chapter 14.
first one to find it wins the prize. Yeah.
That's buildings, not buildings.
16.2.
Yeah, I think that sounds better.
Yeah?
Because I was looking to find 16.2 somewhere.
16.2? I see a reference there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there, you have a condition on the second part of that paragraph for sure.
Uh-huh.
Okay, it's just the use of native plants. And we're, people, I kind of think in the developed areas that the kind of palette they proposed next to the buildings and everything works. I'm not sure if everybody's in agreement with that. I'm just thinking maybe the areas that actually abut the more natural area is where they might consider changing it out a bit. Where the trail comes in at the south end, maybe that first part of the bed isn't as ornamental. I'm not sure.
Do we want to,
Maybe the area that's at the northwest corner, where the drive-through is on one side of the trail and you have.
How about this? Mr. Chair, I move we add condition 27 that would state applicant shall use more native plant, or, I'm sorry. Condition 27,
provide greater use?
applicant shall provide a greater use of native plants in the transition between
Yes.
the native to the built environment.
That's good. Second,
Discussion?
just
All-
the way he said it.
All those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Okay.
Any
Mike?
other, I don't have any other, we have a main motion that's still on the
Yes, we
floor
do.
as amended.
Yes, we do.
So,
Okay, any further conditions? All right, so help me out here. We have a motion and a second to approve the application with modifications as presented to include up to condition 27. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the application as amended indicate by your vote to say aye.
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 Mr. Chair, I move to direct the Development Services Department to prepare findings of fact for signature by the chair, which affirms the Development Commission's decision to approve the application for Issaquah Plaza 221, file numbers PLN 12-00065 through 67.
Second. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously.
All right.
Where's my hammer?
I'd just like to make one comment. I'd say, I greatly appreciate the efforts the applicant has made in working with the city, and especially having to be the guinea pigs on the first people going through this
Pioneer.
process. The pioneer. But also on the building design and providing the attractive frontage on all sides of the buildings,
Yeah, huge.
which is really a necessary part of bringing those buildings out to the street, getting that pedestrian interest, but then still having it within the site. I think you guys have done a great job, so thank you very much.
And I would like to add to that, there is a tremendous amount of time and money being put into the restoration of Issaquah Creek. and the boundaries by the city and by private elements too. I don't know if you saw the Issaquah Press today about some of the stuff that's going on in Lake Sammamish, real close to the mouth of Issaquah Creek. And I personally think that what you're doing with the creekside area is really nice, and it sets a good precedent. So thank you for that too.
I wanted to add on to that too. Driving by your site today, you really have just a beautiful site to build on, and you've done an excellent job, I think, developing the hardscape portion of it, but then the trails and the linkages, they're just great. You've done a really good job.
We like it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right. So we were getting close, but let's.
I nominate Randy to be chair.
Yeah, are we done? Can we go now?
No.
It's a light year.
What is the future of the?
Oh, I'll tell you what.
We'll go by.
Are we going to do the election of officers now, or are we going to have any discussion?
Oh, I have lots of stuff, discussion.
But no, I mean, then there are the updates too. I mean, because David still has some stuff to tell us about the conjoining and times frames and stuff like that too.
Why don't
So-
you do that update first?
Yeah, that's what I'd like.
Because if
Okay.
it's going to change, then.
Take it.
I can't joke, huh?
No, then do it.
Yeah,
Are we still on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the meeting.
yes, you're
we
still
have,
on.
We haven't
This is
adjourned
still,
yet.
So it's not official yet, but my understanding is I believe the administration is leaning towards delaying the consolidation of commissions for perhaps a year or so. There you go. Just feel that.
Another year of tuition.
Yeah, we'll add to your retirement.
And I think you all received a survey.
One more meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember you received a survey, and thank you for filling out the survey and your involvement in that process. And it's not official yet, but I think that's what I've been hearing.
Well, I went to the, was it Services Commission that discussed it? Oh, you too.
I think
That's
you were
right.
there, both of,
Yeah.
and that's,
There were some really good questions asked about whether or not, are we doing enough, or should we do more, or do you really know that this is what you want to do? So I thought it was a very good meeting.
And for those of you who weren't there, there was at one point where I assume he's a city staffer that apparently compiled the survey that was talking about the hours that were put in by the volunteers, the various members of the boards and commissions and everything. And one of the things that I noted was that it was very clear to me that when he came to the Development Commission and he was telling the committee about the hours that went in, I believe that he was only talking about the meeting time. How many hours, and so I told the council, I think that's a little short of what actually the commissioners put in, because we get a very significant amount of preparation to do before every meeting, and that most of us go and look at the site and so on and so forth. So I thought it was close to double, realistically, close to double the amount of time that was indicated presented to the committee.
Well, another good question for David would be, we were so inactive. Are you expecting us to be way more active?
Take it, Dave.
we know of some projects that are in the pipeline in the valley area, but there still aren't a whole
No, it seemed
ton
like
of
most
them
of them are
coming
on the
down the
highlands.
line.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a bunch going to the UVDC, and I think in large part, Port Blakely's selling some of their projects, their land, and so there's a real rush there right now. We know outside the villages right now, the Issaquah Middle School is in to build a new middle school.
Wow.
If you've heard that one.
We're at.
On the site of the Clark Elementary School
Oh, really?
right now, so north of the high school.
So Clark's going away?
Well, it's like a shell game thing, so I think you build a middle school in the field where, if I got this right, like the field in the back of Clark.
Yeah.
Clark goes to the middle school temporarily, and then you build another school where Clark is, or it's moving
Wow.
things around.
Do you know why the city's postponing it till the next year and making that decision?
On the commission
Yeah.
consolidation, I think it just needed more time to consider issues, and also there's, the May 1 is the normal time where commissions reappointments, which comes up
Yes.
to the next point
That's,
of, our proposal to the administration was to delay the whole reappointment process and not do the interviews and just reappoint all of you, whoever's expiring, for another year. So, and I think, Mary Lou, you might be one.
I'm one. Did they go with that? Did they agree with that?
I think that's tentative.
Term is up.
Yeah, I heard that they wanted to have the interview for fairness. They wanted to have the interviews.
Okay, well, maybe that's the case then, so.
we haven't been told one way or the other. I guess is the, my position.
So normally they expire as of today, May 1st, so.
You know,
So
one
we've
of
got-
the issues too is UVDC. UVDC was still going to stay out on its own.
Yeah.
And the city is turning into this patchwork of, well, now, Central Issaquah is one thing we look at, but then we have the other guidelines for other parts of the city, and then there's these master development agreements. And does it make sense to leave UVDC and us separate? Or not us, but the new commission separate? That was a big part of the discussion, actually.
Well, and the master plan developments are, there's a lot of work going on up in the Highlands, but they're reaching the end of their development. So they'll be maxed out.
Yep.
So,
Another question, Dave.
Yeah.
Are we going to have sit-down sponsored class, say, to talk about this? Seems like there's a lot of question that came up, and everybody has their own interpretation of what it is.
That's something for you all to discuss.
You know-
We're available to do it.
I think we should. I mean,
I do too.
Mel knows it really, really well, and
He could
I
teach
think
you
I
that.
probably.
Not a lot of the,
spent a lot of time
the
on it.
detail of what you guys have put in there, added in on the descriptive stuff. Because as you said, we had a checklist that covered every single thing.
25 pages long.
Yeah.
How about this? I believe that it would be really good for us to have schedule a development commission meeting or a workshop, but do it at the same time we have a development commission meeting, and have it be a workshop, and give us time as individuals to read through it, make our notes or questions or whatever, and then meet at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday night.
I think that's great, but I think it also needs to be coached in with what are the expectations of our role in this
Bingo.
process?
And that's-
Because there's a lot of interpretation in here and a lot less prescriptive design.
And that's what David was saying earlier, or what he told me when I asked him to bring up, is that the objective is, as I understand it anyways, is to get the Development Commission to be less concerned in the community conferences and with the details of the kind of materials that are used and so on, and that be more in an approval stage of the negotiations that have gone on between the staff and the applicant. So that's a good question. That's a pretty fundamental change in the way we do things.
Yeah, that's a good
So-
point, we're trying to save energy, time, but I think in the long run, it may not be such a good idea in that, it's a design process, and are you going to take a look at the colors, the material, and how it blends together, or are you just saying, we look at the site plan, that's good enough, and then let it go? Well, what's the point of having all this volunteer willing to sit down and spend the time? Why not take through all the process? It's free.
And to evaluate a project against this code, I think there does need to be a certain amount of detail for whoever the decision maker is, and if you're it, I don't think we can go to totally conceptual. There needs to be some amount of detail to really get into the weeds.
And if the city's going to continue our existence, if we're going to continue to be a development commission, then along with the changes that are being made, along with the new plans, I still think that we have to proceed on the basis of what our responsibility is. Ultimately, we don't want any surprises about when we're driving by something that we approved and say, what? That's orange. What, So I personally think that we need to strike a medium between the efficiency and the responsibility of the Development Commission, the efficiency of the staff process, and the responsibility of
And
the
at the same
Development
time,
Commission.
if we expect the applicant to come in on the first or second submittal or for review, how much details do we need from them? And is it fair for them to put in all the effort to come up with all those details, and then we say, guess what, we don't like,
Right.
and then they have to start all over again? You know, that got to be fair to the applicant too.
So I like the idea of a workshop during one of our standing meeting times, and I think the way I'm thinking about it is we have a little bit of learning to do on the new code, because most of the projects are going to be, I'm guessing, in the central area, covered by this new land use code. So I think that'll be important. I think we also need to have a conversation about the role of staff versus the role of commission in the decision-making process, because it's changed, because the standards are different. They're not as prescriptive. They're much more discretionary. So we need to get clarity there.
We saw this one because it was over 3 acres.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be pretty big
Right.
for us to see.
To see it. And then I think the other piece for me is just procedurally, how are we going to go through this in an efficient way? It was a little awkward today, trying to thumbing through, what am I supposed to be looking at? Looking at the code, am I looking at the staff report? It was a little challenging. And so trying to figure out what's an efficient way to do that. And I think that investment of time will do a couple of things. One is it will be more efficient, so we can get out of here maybe a little earlier and not leave people hanging all night. And then I think the other thing that it does is it makes us, we don't look awkward and clumsy, and the people that you're working with from the city's reputation, I think, is good. And yes, we're free, but they're not.
Right.
So we need to be sensitive to how much time we're spending here.
Can we do this? I'll take the responsibility if you agree to this. If each one of you want to send me a bullet point email of what you think the workshop needs to accomplish, okay? And I'm not talking about text. Or if you want to send a Gutenberg Bible, that's fine.
No.
But we're all, well, most of us are busy. Most of you are busy.
Yeah, we'll say
But anyways, if you could just, after, and it doesn't have to be right away, but after you've looked through this and you get some ideas, take some notes, and then tell me, and I'll codify them and send them back out to you and say, okay, here's the general feeling about what this workshop needs to accomplish. And then I'll talk to Dave about it and get back to you, and we'll go from there.
Sounds like
Does that work?
the duty that a chair would typically undertake. It sounds like
Yeah,
it's
sounds very chairman-like.
That we,
You walked into that.
do the election at this point in time.
All right.
Do I have a second?
I guess
Yeah.
one aspect of it too, maybe I'll bring it up now because we talked about before in Connie's letter, you actually even mentioned it, the idea of having a chart.
With charts, yep.
And I do wonder if there are a lot of things that have to be covered, but it might even help you in your review to have, even if it is 60 items, a checklist, because even if
We've thought
you
about
wouldn't even
that.
have to be covered, just say, covered, yes, and then there has to be no discussion or anything. And then the
Yes.
ones where you don't think it's met it,
Why?
to say, here's why, and if there's a condition, here's condition
Here's the condition.
22.
Can your report
And then we can
handle
look back to 22.
an
and-
appendix structure like that, where you take all of the code language out of your report and put it in an appendix? Because we can't just have this and then a brief staff report, because the public doesn't have this. So it still has to be in the report, it's just maybe not in the body of the report.
And it would only have to be the portions that they don't think meet it?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
So, and I can actually stay after and show you what I mean, but I think
Okay.
a lot of the language in your report could have been better put in a table at the back. And
Which
you
is
have
what
a heading and a
Connie
section number,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and you just say, yes, it meets it, or it's not applicable, or no, it doesn't meet it, and 6 sentences about what they need to do to meet it. But then, like Mel said, right there too, you have to say, see condition, proposed condition 14, 16, and 19 or something, because it was hard to track back and forth.
Without having to rewrite that whole code there too, right?
Right.
You know what? Believe me, I would love to do something like that also. I'm sitting there just writing forever. And,
Yeah, because you cut and pasted a lot of stuff
Well-
over, and I think that needs to be,
not
we will read, when we read you say it meets, we're gonna flip back and look at that table and appendix and
Yeah.
say, I don't know, it says weather protection. I don't think he got it all. But it was a long way to read to get to the conditions today, and hard to pull out those pieces that were not meeting, which are the
Well,
ones we want to focus
okay.
on anyway.
I know he understands that, because when I met with him, he was saying,
Oh, yeah.
This is draft of chapter 1 attempt 2.
Yeah.
So,
And it could be, I think, combine the development and design standards.
Subjects together?
Just put them together and the bullet point. Because I was thinking by that meeting, if we didn't meet until you had a draft of that, then we could, during that meeting, go through it all and give you feedback.
what if
Okay.
we do this? What if we provide each other and Dave with what we would like to see in terms of the product of the meeting? What is the outcome? What is the objective of the workshop? And in the meantime, he can be drafting this proposal on on the approval document, for one of a better title, for the Development Commission. And then when we meet, we can match A and B.
Yeah. No, I know there's a lot of time that went into putting this together. Now, this meeting, we'll get a good feel of what the background information, the philosophy of how we came about this. But I'm sure when we sit down and start talking about it, there's a point of clarification that needs to go in here. Now, are we prepared, and can we even change it, or are we just
I don't think we
thinking,
can.
in our mind, paragraph 4 is not clear, so, we need to do that.
With any code, if there's gray area, the decision makers can interpret it.
Yeah.
But if it's black and white, no, right? It's a code.
Right,
Yeah.
it's code, and we don't get to change that, the city
Right,
council
Right.
City council.
has
So,
to change
okay.
that.
Okay,
And also,
so-
though, I've been saying, said to the council too, we're going to find things as we use it,
Yeah.
and we want to keep a list
Right.
of changes to consider, and if
And
we've
we'll
got
find
some.
stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. We will find
there will be
stuff.
things that, I assume, there will be things that the commission the Development Commission is going to say, this is really confusing.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
we'll make a
it's a
recommendation to the city
never-ending
that it
process
be
if you keep-
considered to be reworded to so-and-so,
Right.
and then the city says yeah or no, or yeah, maybe.
And to add to the staff report discussion, we, in the second week of June, we really are spending a week of many staff
So next month.
next month to break down the whole process from the first time we talked to an applicant on the phone to the final decision. And so this whole staff report and how to make it easier for you to use and us and the public, I think we want to talk about that, and any input you have before then
No,
could help that.
Okay.
were you thinking that even the staff part, besides the first few pages here are kind of general, but then when he starts going section by section, were you thinking that would be a table?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
The whole thing would just be one big table.
From here on?
From
Yeah.
where, Mary Lou?
Oh, sorry, where it starts with development standards and regulations, so 1 through 11 would just be a table in the report. Did it have a
I
heading?
like that.
It would say meet or does not
Yeah.
meet, and if it doesn't meet, then it's got an explanation part, and then there'll be another column that says proposed
Condition number.
conditions, yeah. So there's only really, in essay format, 2 pages, 3 pages, and
The
then,
description of the project.
and then there's a table, and then there's a list of conditions, and then there's an appendix, which is all the code language that you would refer to if you needed to say something didn't meet
Yep.
6.8.2. There'd be a code table as an
You
appendix.
still
It's an
need that code
exhibit.
table,
Oh,
or could
the-
we
the
say?
pub- Public
Just
would.
Just the
The public
sections
needs
that
it.
you think are,
Okay.
Yeah.
that,
I don't know. Well, you need that code
I
table
think
for
the whole-
everything.
I think
but
we
is
gotta
this the
err-
code table?
But you know what? Somebody reviewing
Yeah.
it, like Connie, doesn't have this, right? So
But it's
if-
online,
If
right?
staff writes a
It
report
won't
and
be online.
says me,
Yeah, it's
It's gonna be
online
online.
now. Someday it'll be,
It's
that's
gonna,
I
but
don't want to have
Okay.
yeah, I know.
it hard for a
Yeah.
for a citizen to argue one way or the other it meets or doesn't meet.
Yeah, so for some things like the street design, to throw in that graph showing the urban core streets is,
Yeah.
would be very helpful.
Right.
Just
So
add
are we
that
going to
in.
go move for the next agenda then?
I
The
have a
election
couple
of
more
the,
things to ask though, David, if it's okay, more process-like. You were in a rush, so this time when you did the conditions, it's obvious that you just wanted them to go back to the report and go, look, I
All
told
right.
you what you needed to do, so you wrote, meet this section. So, but I want to make sure the conditions actually say something, including that you can refer back to, as required by section. So if they don't have enough native plants, the condition says, adjust the palette, add more native plants as per. And then what is the process if they did not like the decision tonight and they wanted to appeal the conditions? Is the process for them when it comes to us still the hearing examiner?
Yes.
Okay. So we would never be in a situation where we conditioned something and then that condition didn't get applied. Not unless they went to a hearing examiner and the hearing examiner, because the administrator now has a lot of authority to change things. So is it possible we could say you have to put the bike lane in and then you go back and the head of development says, no, we don't. And we,
I don't want to say no for sure.
yeah,
I
I'm not
think
sure about
there's-
that.
I think there's a section here about revisions.
Yes.
That's all work.
So then,
But one of the
Right.
issues there, though, and we'd have to look at the scope of authority of the commission. And if
Yes.
we've exceeded our authority, then whoever the code administrator is may be able
Let's
to
get to
say
the
they're
workshop.
outside of the scope
And I
of
would
their
like
authority.
that,
maybe the
I
city attorney.
personally would like the scope of the authority of the Development Commission to be a topic of the workshop.
yeah, I think so.
And I think that needs to be defined in writing eventually, so that every new member, every new appointee
Understands.
comes in and
Yeah.
can look at something, because I was really unclear about that when I came on. And it'd be really nice to have something that says, this is what the DC
Well,
is
well,
authorized
the
to do.
city code actually specifies
There is-
the authority.
Yep, and the review process and everything like that, too. But I'm talking about just something, I mean, I think that if the DC continues to be an independent entity, or if it's melded into another one, there ought to be written guidelines for new members. That, they could be just cut and pasted out of the code, but I think there would be maybe a shorter learning curve if there was something that new people could refer to.
When I had a part two to that question, so where you had a condition that said you need to, what was the one with the back of the building? It's called, you need to meet 11.3, established street wall built to line. So the guidelines, they're pretty general about how you do that. Suppose that condition's in there and the developer comes back and says, you know, I kind of reread it and I don't agree with you. I think I can just leave that blank wall. Do you then come back to us and say, well, he thinks the blank wall meets the condition, or he thinks if he changes the brick and he puts some banded brick in a few places, that meets it? Like, what happens when you, because we want them to have the flexibility, but what if they come back with something and where is the judgment for that meets or doesn't meet with the condition wanted?
So I guess the way it's written now, the judgment goes to the staff,
Yeah.
whether it meets it or not.
Yeah.
But if we felt it didn't meet the condition even,
Do you have the authority to tell them,
we'd
keep on trying, or I'm going to bring it back to the development
say we're going to bring
commission?
it back to the commission, or we could say, hey, you don't meet the condition, we can't approve your
Right.
permit.
Or if they came and said our color for this building
that's
is fuchsia, and there's
That
nothing
is-
in here
That
that
is not a
says
theoretical
it can't.
question. There is a building that we have approved that the first time I drove past it after it was built, I went, huh? And I actually went in and looked, and it's not the same, it's not what we approved.
I'm just wondering, because I like the general conditions and I like giving them the flexibility, I just wonder what happens when you're not sure they meet the intent? Do you have the authority to tell them it has to come back? You know,
Yeah, I
that's
think
just
we do.
not it.
We have that bump up option, and
Okay.
we could come back for clarification before the commission, or
Yeah.
just require that extra level of review.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to make real sure, I mean, I just think that we don't want to get in a position where we see a structure that we have worked on and we don't recognize what we see. Or there is a significant, obvious deviation from what we approved, and we don't find out about it until it's built. And that's like the worst possible case scenario as far as I'm concerned, and it doesn't happen very often,
So,
but.
just a quick comment on that. So it's part of the conversation about the role of staff and their decision-making authority and our reliance on their implementation of the conditions we write. If we write very specific conditions, that's what gets implemented. If they're general, we're relying on some professional
Oh,
judgment here to do that.
Absolutely.
So we have to be careful about how we do the conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other question that you're raising, Mr. Chair, is that about what we approve. If we're moving away from very specific and prescriptive approvals, and that we're going to be saying this is the kind of the outcome we're looking
Yeah.
for, and we're not saying here's the final design, or the construction plans that are in front of us, there's still work to be done. We're going to see outcomes that staff comes up with that, in their opinion, meets it, but we all may have a little different opinion about what the
Yeah, and
implementation
the key-
looks like,
the
and we
key
need
is
to be
meeting the
okay with
code.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I mean, we're, like we talked about at the beginning, this is a transition, we're gonna have to experience this a little bit, and I like the idea of the workshop and trying to get
Yep.
clarity to help us be more efficient.
And I also want to keep, that conditions were so general tonight. I think the expectation would be a condition written with, to be clear about what's the intent, or we'd actually have a photo to point to, something like that, or a landscape palette like that, or colors like this, so that hopefully we're on the same page of what the expectation is.
Okay, so you're going to draft a new condition, staff report
Temp for a
format.
new
Yeah,
report.
a template for a new report, just with a column approach. And I'll synthesize your comments, suggestions, priorities as they can.
And just one note, looking at section 3, it says, "A final decision shall be made by the decision-making authority as set forth in this code." And for a level 3 review, the decision-making authority is the commission.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like
Yeah.
there's a way for that to be overruled,
I didn't
other
think
than
so.
going to hearing
Yeah, it
examiners.
wasn't
I think it's
intended to
hearing
change.
exam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we will see less. I mean, we saw this
Yeah.
one because it was
Yeah.
3.4 acres, but we won't be seeing.
Okay,
Can we move to the next
we
item?
can.
Agenda.
Next item of the agenda, final item of the agenda is election of officers. Do we have any nominations? Do we have any nominations?
Yeah, nomination? Yep,
I-
Randy.
I nominate Randy
I s-
to be chair.
I
Second.
said, oh, you second.
Discussion?
Close.
I thought it was.
Move the nomination be closed.
All right. All those in favor of the nomination as presented?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. All right. Do we have the
Sorry.
vice, chair?
Carl is our
I was
vice.
going to say, do we have a vice chair nomination as well? Because somebody's got to, all right, so do we have a nomination for vice chair?
Must be present not to get nominated, right?
Well, I don't know what the technical is. Can we do that?
Yeah, we checked before.
Good, thank you.
Oh,
So go nominate away.
right. Anybody nominate
Do it.
Carl
Sweetberg.
Swedberg?
Whitberg to be the vice chair of
Se-
the Development Commission?
Second?
Second? Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. All right.
Unanimous.
Can I give him a full
Any
year's
further,
worth of work,
any
right?
further
Show up on
discussion? If
election
not, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks, folks, for being
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, good job.
Actually, it was. You were probably sweating it